Hello, we are live. We're live with this episode of All Politics Are Local. This is the episode of Elections Matter. Ed?
Well, welcome to All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. Y'all know if it's Friday, y'all know it's time for All Politics Are Local. So, as Jonathan just said, we're going to start with talking to candidates going forward from here all the way until May 12th. So, if you guys are out there and if we don't get an opportunity to reach out to you, make sure you reach out to us and we'll try to schedule to have you on. So, we're going to have one of our first candidates coming up. I'm sure John will give you that in the rundown who's going to be first tonight as we talk to her, of course, about her candidacy for office here in the city of Newark. Also, before we get started, I just want to say a big congratulations to the First Lady, our First Lady, Linda Baraka, on a successful fundraiser last night, of course, which Kim attended on behalf of All Politics Are Local. And just want to say congratulations to her. Congratulations to Councilwoman LaMonica McIver. The tremendous turnout with all of them beautiful, beautiful Black women supporting LaMonica. So just want to say congratulations and thank you, Kim, for going to support that fundraiser last night. All right, John.
All right, so we are on for tonight's rundown. We're going to start off actually with the more on the war in Iraq. It's important that people just have an understanding of why it is that we're bombing people again, right? So I think that we're going to start off with that conversation. I know that everyone has a lot to say, and the theme of this conversation is going to be geography is important because when you look at a map and you look at what's there, I think a lot of things become much more clear about why we're having the war, why Iran is defending itself in the way it's defending, and why this whole thing was stupid to begin with. Like we should have never, ever, ever got involved. And it even becomes even more clear why this is not in the U.S. interest. There is nothing that the U.S. will gain from this. There is nothing the U.S. would ever have gained from this. Just by looking at maps, you can tell a lot of stories, right? So we're going to talk about that. And then at 7 o'clock, we're going to have our first candidate who's going to come on and as a candidate. And that is Linda Lloyd, who's running for Councilwoman at large. We hope to have, there are a lot of candidates running. We hope to have all of them on our show at some point before the election, because we think that the whole reason why we even started the show is because we think that civic discourse is important. And it's important that people get involved, that they run for office, and that we see who they are, because as the theme of the show is, elections have consequences. Elections matter. So 7 o'clock, we get to meet Linda Lloyd, who is running for Councilwoman at large. At 7:20, we're going to go from Selma. We're going to go have a conversation about Selma to the SAVE Act, and we're going to have that conversation with Larry Hamm and Nuzhat Chowdhury. And at 8:30, of course, we're going to have DJ Rhino in the State of Hip Hop, where we're going to have conversations about culture. And that is the rundown for the show tonight. So the first part of the conversation we're going to get into and we're going to jump into is this war in Iran. As I said last week, one of the best documentaries I've ever seen on this was a PBS, right? Public Broadcast, the Public Broadcasting Corporation and Frontline did a documentary called Bitter Rivals. It's a 4-hour documentary. It's done in two parts. And it really details the history of both Iran and Saudi Arabia and the tensions that they've had. And it starts in 1953 and it goes to but the pinnacle years are really like 1979. And then it goes to the different historical events in the region that have helped shape the region and help shape United States interaction in the region. I think anybody who's having a commentary about the war, about what we were going on, should definitely read and see this documentary. All right, so we have James McIntosh up. We have James McIntosh in the background. if you saw our advertising, we were talking originally at 6 about Trump's mental health with Dr. Carlton Page and Dr. James McIntosh and Professor Linda Carter. So they came through. So we're going to shift what we're talking about, and we're going to start talking about Iran at 6:30, and we're going to bring them in to talk about Trump's mental health and what happens with that. Again, I guess this is also within the theme of elections have consequences. Dr. James McIntosh,
Yes,
welcome to
sir.
All Politics Are Local.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
So, yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
can
hear you
hear you.
fine,
We can
sir.
hear you loud and clear. We can hear you loud
Okay.
and clear.
Great.
Right. And so, Zaid, can you do an introduction?
Well, first, a big thank you, and the big thank you is a view from the streets. CMOTAP, the Committee to Eliminate Images Offensive to African People, is from whence Dr. James McIntosh springs, and he comes to us fresh off an important victory on that front. Let us remember that just a little while ago, Netflix put forth one of the worst expressions of racist caricaturization of our people that we have seen in decades, with its sick redo, remake, mocking of the former sitcom classic Good Times. Tap turned the volume up, got us all out in the street, getting on some of everybody's nerves who we needed to get off, and that show went in the way of the garbage can. Now, Netflix will say that it was a question of ratings. Well, yeah, because we told everybody not to watch that mess, right? And we told everybody to pull their behinds away from Netflix, period, as long as they do that. So, yeah, that will affect some ratings, right? So, however they characterize it is one way, but from the view from the street, the people will characterize it as a win. We're not going to go like that anymore. So, Dr. McIntosh, welcome to All Politics Are Local. It's good to finally get you in this space. It's been a while. We had some tech issues at the beginning of that campaign when y'all were trying to get it going. Welcome to the space. And I want to appreciate Dr. Mack on this front also. When Trump first came around, there was Dr. McIntosh that raised the question of what kind of person are we putting into the office from a mental health vantage point. And then you would see other mental health professionals, guardedly as they tried to be, acknowledge that that is an important question to ask. Well, now, not only is he in office again, but from the looks of how he is tearing up our streets and tearing up people's countries, that he is coming straight up unhinged. This is my interpretation. I ain't a mental health professional, but y'all see what's going on. We we got the doctor in the house. We'll let him give us his view from the field from his critical professional mental health lens. Doc, you got the mic.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Brother Zaid. I will say this, that actually even before Trump, a person who has a very similar personality had been the mayor of New York. And so I wrote a series of articles.
Yes. We remember.
Yes. I wrote a series of articles in the Amsterdam called The Unauthorized Psychoanalysis of Rudolph Giuliani. And then I put those together in a book. And so I did the same thing with this one. I serialized the book in the Amsterdam News and was writing articles. Now, with respect to the first people to say something, well, I think probably my articles on Trump may have been among the first, but there were lots of people who were alarmed right from the beginning. And the fact that they were mental health professionals made it a particular problem. That's why I made mine mine is political satire. It's not a real psychoanalysis. It's political satire, because the American Psychiatric Association has a provision which they said called the Goldwater Rule, which they say that no mental health professional is supposed to diagnose a person if you haven't met that person, if they haven't given their permission, et cetera, et cetera.
It's
So,
interesting because that is the first question that I actually had
okay.
that in my head when I saw what was set up in terms of the diagnosis of mental health, and I saw a doctor. I was like, wait, because you didn't see him. I know that people can talk about it theoretically, but you can't actually diagnose him, even though we're kind of all doing it, right? But as a mental health professional, you can't give an actual clinical diagnosis.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And so the Goldwater rule, says that you're not supposed to do that. But what happened is that several mental health practitioners were so alarmed by what they saw that they began to write letters to the President of the United States. They began to write letters to the New York Times. And a letter to President Obama, a woman by the name of Judith Herman. And her book is like really, I would say, a very good book in a limited way on trauma. It's called Trauma and Recovery. That's the thing that I know her from. And she's a professor at clinical psychology at Harvard University. And she wrote, and another woman, Nanette Gartrell, also from Harvard, they wrote a book. They wrote a letter to President Obama, telling him that, wow, he has widely reported symptoms of mental instability, including grandiosity, impulsivity, hypersensitivity to slights or criticism, and apparent inability to distinguish between fantasy and reality. And so they didn't diagnose him, but they kind of just said, these are some of the things that we see. And what they asked for was a full neuropsychiatric evaluation by an impartial team of investigators. Other people came in, and then eventually a whole movement was formed. A guy by the name of Dr. Gartner formed something called the Duty to Warn movement. And myself, about a lot of, actually it ended up with being about 70,000 people signed petitions. It was originally meant to be only mental health practitioners. We can't say how many mental health practitioners but at least 70,000 people. And it's possible that 80% or more of them were mental health professionals. They began to critique Trump on the basis of a duty to warn. And that comes from something called the Tarasoff case. The Tarasoff case was a case where a guy told his psychiatrist, he was a spurned lover, he told his psychiatrist he was going to kill this woman. And the psychiatrist said, yes, okay, thank you, tell me some more. That sort of thing, and didn't do anything about it. And then the guy went out and killed a woman. And so the courts ruled that, basically became a rule that psychiatrists, we have confidentiality. The patient has confidentiality. But if the patient says they're going to harm somebody else and the psychiatrist feels that there's a likelihood of them doing it, they have a duty to warn. And so the way they got around this Goldwater thing was not to make a diagnosis, but say, we have a duty to warn you that this guy is going to kill the country, And so everybody did it in a different way. I did it in a way, and I kind of stuck to the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5, and, pointed out just things that everybody sees right away. The same things that Judith Herman said. You see the grandiosity, the impulsivity, the hypersensitivity, but I put it in the form of like a book where I would just bring in different aspects. But this second time when he ran, that basically Gartner, who headed that movement, and the other dozens of psychiatrists that signed on and psychologists that signed on said, no, we're not going with it. We're making a diagnosis. We're making a diagnosis because and the diagnosis, I did it in parts. I pointed out his narcissistic traits. I pointed out his sociopathic traits. But there is another diagnosis that I'm not really even certain if it was in the DSM-5. It wasn't like an official diagnosis that people would give. And it's an ominous diagnosis. It's like diagnosing stage 5 cancer, and that is malignant narcissism. And malignant narcissism, really, there are 3 diagnoses in the DSM-5 that you put those all together and you come up with malignant narcissism. And those three diagnoses are sociopathy, or I should say antisocial personality disorder. And that's one. A second one is a paranoid personality disorder. And another one is narcissistic personality disorder. And then the thing, I guess, that's really the worst in there is sadism. And all of those together, the person has to have all of that in order to be diagnosed as malignant narcissism. And the reason why that diagnosis is so ominous is because many or most psychiatrists believe that it's incurable. You can't help it. You can't fix it. You know, I mean, I'm very serious now. I mean, this is that you can't fix it. So among the people who, you know, you give that diagnosis in history would be people like Adolf Hitler. And so, I mean, I you know, you told me the floor is mine. I actually thought you were going to ask me questions, as you said before, but I'm giving you, I think I'm going to stop for a little while because there's just so many examples that you can use to point out those different aspects of his personality. I'll give two. I want to give two because most people might not know these. One is that his first wife, in a written deposition, a deposition which she could have been charged with perjury, she said that he raped her, that he was upset about, I'm speaking of his first wife, Ivana, who came from Czechoslovakia, that he was upset because he had pain from this scalp reduction, that he's had, to try to make it look like he had some hair. And he pulled out some of her hair in anger and raped her. And then the next morning when he came and found her crying, he looked at her and said, did it hurt? Okay. Now, that's a weird statement to make by a guy who, we remember, was arguing that he didn't have little hands. You remember that in one of the debates where he was saying he didn't have little hands? Did it hurt? So that's obviously sadistic. You can see that trait. For any other aspect of those things that we talked about, you can find examples in it. You'll find your own examples. Sociopathic people are criminals. I mean, essentially, if you just just break it into street language, it's a person with total disregard of other people's rights. They may steal, they may rob, they may, do any kind of thing. So two examples of that and the sadism is that, and I'm wondering why people are saying they need to see the Epstein papers. What
we want to do is we want to bring Professor Carter in as well.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Hi, Dr.
Okay.
Hey, how you doing? Okay.
Okay.
No, I can't. You know what it is? I can't see. I'm going to come back to the screen. I was on another screen, so I'm going to come back to the screen. I didn't realize you were waiting. Give me a signal. Did you give me a signal, a hand signal?
Oh no, that's fine. We're good. But Professor Carter, where do you stand on this? What are your opinions on this?
All right.
You are a lawyer by training, not a mental health professional, but I know that a lot of other people got involved. So tell us your perspective.
Well, legally and in terms of history, this is not new, and unfortunately, everybody's surprised. But if you think about, if you know your history, you should not be surprised. There is the whole concept of neoliberalism, which starts in the early 1400s, with Spain and Portugal engaging in the initial scorch and burn off the east-south coast of the African continent. And then you have the doctrine of Christian dominant discovery, which is written over the course of 60 years by 3 popes. It says wherever Europeans go, it belongs to them. And most of you know that Christopher Columbus was lost. However, the fact that he touched Turtle Island, which is called, from the tip of Canada to the tip of South America, that meant that it belonged to them. Now, if you think about it historically, and I'm going to come to a little bit of the policy and the law. If you think about it, a culture that can engage in hacking babies in front of their indigenous parents, right? You're talking about a culture that used people as property. I know a lot of Black young people think we were slaves. We were never slaves. We were property. And that's why the person who wrote Amazing Grace, who was a ship captain, who used to have sex with 6-month-old babies because they were property, right? And then you go on, Black people were bred like animals. Who breeds people like animals? Think about it. If you know your history, you are never surprised. People who in a culture that would remove the skin of Black people to make purses and pocketbooks. People who would, the last lynching that we know of, that I know of, was only a year ago, right? The other thing is that, you know, most people don't know the last slave plantation didn't close to 2008 when Barack Obama became president. So if you understand the history of this country, and I'll add some more things for people to look at. 2025, some people haven't read it yet. After all this time, they haven't read it. If they read it, they wouldn't be surprised. You have the Mandate for Leadership that was basically published during the Reagan administration over 45 years ago. And then about 1971, 1975, I always get the dates wrong, but you had the Powell Memorandum in response to Franklin Roosevelt's Saving Capitalism. I'm almost finished.
No, you're all right.
Saving Capitalism. And it's written, he became Justice Powell. He was actually the attorney for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And he wrote this whole thing, the Powell Memorandum, in response. And you can go, if you look at it, you could tick off everything that they've done to get rid of, you know, they're going Social Security, unemployment. Think about unemployment during the COVID, you know, challenges people had. Then you had a paper called Crisis in American Democracy, which is basically commissioned by the oligarchs of this country in response to the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the Chicano movement, you name the movement. It was geared to young people raised in hell who knew they had a right to raise hell in this country to make it the democracy they say or been told that it should be. And they basically, the paper says, and I encourage everybody to read it for yourself, that how dare you young people think you're going to make us accountable? We ain't doing it. So, and then the other part, another piece I just want to throw out is that about 1969, 1967, 66 or 69, I get my dates wrong, but there was a meeting in Urbana, Illinois. In that meeting was everybody who was involved in building military bases. Now we have probably more than 850 military bases around the world. So this group, anybody who had anything to do with construction, had decided that, I'm talking about the people who made fences, made the concrete, the attorneys, the architects, everybody who was involved, decided that they're no longer going to be building military bases. They're going to be building prisons. Not only are they going to build prisons, they decided who was going to be in it. They already had the group that was going to be in there. And so, you know, over time, if you look when the heroin and crack cocaine and all these things, that was part of ensuring the people who come in. Then, you know, as you know, you probably figure out by now with this whole immigration thing that it moves from prisons to private prisons to detention centers. If you were paying attention to the stock market, either the Friday or Thursday before Trump was sworn in, the stock market regarding detention centers went off the chart. So they already knew what they're going to do. And my last thing,
I know that we have like only a limited amount of time.
I know, this is the last.
Can you connect what you're saying to like Trump and his diagnosis?
Right. 1880
in the chat, by the way.
In the 1880s, the court says basically takes in the doctrine of Christian dominant discovery. And then later on, Monroe Doctrine, which Trump has decided to name something different. That's basically the doctrine of Christian dominant discovery, saying we in control of everything from the tip of Canada to the bottom of South America. That's the Monroe Doctrine that flows from the doctrine of Christian dominant discovery. But this is in the 1800s. And then later on, Ruth Bader Ginsburg in 2005, in a footnote in a case called Searle versus Oneida Indians of New York, says that the United States is now predecessor in interest to the doctrine of Christian discovery. So I say all this to say that what Trump is doing is not unusual. What he did for us is to take the cover off of America. And if you've been paying attention, you would know that this is not a surprise. What he's doing is not unusual. It's been happening all along, but there's been a cover on it. So it's not to say I don't support Trump in no way. I've been following him for 50 years. He's not doing anything he hasn't been doing. He's just doing it to America. So you can take it from there.
I want to add, as we wind down, I also put in the chat an article done by his own cousin, psychologist Mary Trump, on the impact of his behavior on the mental health of the country, right? And underneath all of that is this whole question of what kind of state is America anyway, right? What Dr. Carter just described, this country is a settler colonial state,
Mm-hmm.
And it was the settler colonial states that have always been the most violent and the most genocidal.
So it's interesting because, like, with what Dr. Carter said, and Dr. Carter, can you just say if how I interpret you is correct, right? You're like James McIntosh said that Trump is uniquely, like, psychologically horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like what you said is
It
he's
doesn't
just a normal
contradict.
American. So
it doesn't contradict.
Explain.
And during his first term, I heard the head of Viacom Corporation say, "We don't like Trump, but he's the perfect person to make sure we make a whole lot of money." So they're quite aware. The oligarchs or the power elite are quite aware of his person. He's the ideal person to carry out what they want. And I just heard something from a former CIA or somebody who was in. I have friends who are former CIA, but in this instance, the conversation was basically, as long as you give him something, he'll do what you want him to do, or you'll get the benefit of it. So what Dr. McIntosh has said, he's the perfect person for what they want to accomplish. He doesn't have a heart. And then again, think about it. Capitalism doesn't have a moral fiber. It's not, capitalism will take itself out. So he is capitalism.
Right on to that.
Okay, so you're saying that he's just the perfect vehicle.
Exactly.
A psychopath is a perfect vehicle for a psychopathic agenda. And
Exactly.
so you were talking about,
from a media vantage point, Jonathan, a psychopath who wrote a celebrity agenda. Don't dismiss that. He rode the celebrity agenda horse into the White House.
And can you explain that?
A celebrity has a different kind of popularity, right? Because of his popularity and his and people vicariously sometimes embrace celebrities, yearning for their success, wishing it could be their own.
And I would add that part of him running was he was negotiating his contract with NBC for his show. Okay. And then he saw, all the things happening. So, this is not an unusual situation for America. This is what this country's about. You guys have just seen it. Me and Mr. McIntosh been around long enough to know this is the real deal.
And so as we're coming to the end, I know we were just joined by Dr. Payne, and I just want to have Dr. Payne's thoughts on this as well.
Okay.
Linda, why don't you introduce Dr. Payne?
Oh, wow. Dr. Carlton Payne, who's to my left, is just like an amazing person. I've had him on for a couple of times. And, Dr. Payne, since we don't have a lot of time, you can just tell people, basically, he's a psychotherapist, author, retired chief psychologist for the prisons in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He also served as co-host of the program, A Family Therapy Moment, on radio station WURD. And that's basically what he's been doing with regard to the mental health of America, providing a family therapy moment. Dr. Payne?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Can everybody hear me?
Yes. Yes. Welcome to All Politics and Locals, sir.
Excellent conversation. I was just teaching a class, which is why I'm a little late. But I wanted to add to the conversation by pointing out the Simeonization that Trump put on his feed. And this has been something that's been going on in America for decades or generations, making Black people less than what they are, making them, dehumanizing them.
Simianization, break that down.
Giving human beings monkey characteristics, making Obama and his wife into a gorilla. Yes. Roseanne Barr compared Valerie Jarrett to a gorilla.
Yes.
Several people, 50 Cent, all these people did how much they look like monkeys and gorillas. And that makes it much easier for us to be attacked and dehumanized. I want to read a excerpt of two police reports. One is from Stamford, Connecticut. The other one is from Detroit, Michigan. Okay. They call them suspects and subject, but I'm calling them both subjects. Okay. Subject A, Stamford, Connecticut. He was a threat to police. Subject B was a threat to police. Subject A, his behavior became erratic. Subject B, his behavior became erratic. Subject A, he was a danger to the police officers. Subject B, he was a danger to the police officer. Subject A lunged at police officers. Subject B lunged at police officers. Subject A was shot multiple times after lunging at police officers. Subject B was shot multiple times after lunging at police officers. Now, what's the difference between these two subjects? One was Laquan McDonald, a 17-year-old teenager. The other was Travis the chimp, a monkey that's on different kind of commercials. And so they didn't see any difference between the two. And that tells you a lot about how they see African-American people or Black people. They see us as something less. We have superhuman strength. We feel less pain, and we're more closer to simians, which are monkeys. So I wanted to kind of get your reaction on what I just read.
Huge, absolutely huge, and that has been a thread that has gone through all of our colonial experience that includes their justification for making us chattel slaves. It's a long line where that has been the argument to justify that. That is huge, and the fact that that is resurfacing in the way it is at the level of official capacity is nothing to play with.
Now, I don't know how many of you are in this field of psychology, but I want to kind of put out some symptoms. All right, rage in response to criticism, excessive need for accommodation, inability to cope, always asking for accolades. What is that a symptom of?
Narcissism.
Yeah, he said it. Absolutely.
Okay. There are all you need is 5 symptoms to diagnose the personality disorder, and Trump has all 5. So he has narcissistic personality disorder, and all the symptoms are there. You can see by the cabinet meetings he had, where everybody around the room is giving him accolades, and that person has excessive need for accolades. Right? He gets angry when anybody criticizes him. So all those symptoms are there. So from a distance, it's easy to diagnose what his issues are. But his issues are in combination with other symptoms. And like you said, he has difficulty accepting change, and he has narcissism, and he has destructive tendencies. So they kind of all fit together.
I know we're reaching the end of this particular section, but there's one thing that I would like some feedback on, especially from the psychologist, right? Or the mental health professionals.
We're both mental health professionals. I mean, all of us in some way or another. Yeah.
Okay. So there's been a lot of talk about what you said about Trump, that he's diagnosable from a distance. And most of the intelligence services also comment on this. Kamala Harris commented on this. She said that basically he's easy to play. He's easy to manipulate. And what you see, like the stories coming out about how Israel wanted the war and he got in the war. The reports when Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries like Qatar play to his ego. When China puts out these the ways of appeasing him, making him think he wins, but they are actually getting what they want. Do you think that someone like that could have been, and putting this out there, could he have been manipulated by Black people into talking about reparations if he was complimented enough? Or is there something else there that would have made that impossible? Because it seems like everybody's trying to get what they want from him by complimenting him, by finessing him, and by saying stuff, and he does it. He's almost like manipulated. Is he able to be manipulated by everyone based on knowing his psychology, or is it something more limited?
Can I answer that question?
Yes.
I'm going to answer that the way I answer my students' question. I show them an old Happy Days video where this guy named Sticks is invited to Richie's party, the only Black guy in Happy Days, and none of the other kids come. And Fonzie turns around and struts out the door and says, I'm going to fix this. And Richie's father stops Fonz and says, Fonz, even cool can't overcome prejudice. So no, even the stuff that he feeds on, when it comes to a black person, he's going to see it totally different, because what you're telling him, if you're black, it's got to be true, because I'm above you, and I've been taught to think I'm above. So it wouldn't impact upon him the same way as somebody.
Yo, that was a Happy Days episode.
Yes,
nice.
My students love it. You got to feed young people where they are, you know. And when the father says, "Fonz, even cool won't overcome prejudice," and Fonz kind of sits down, you know. So it tells you that how powerful this is, how powerful this mindset is,
and how dangerous it is.
Yes.
And I would add how American this is.
Base hit, extra base hit.
So let me ask you all a question. So the speculation now is, if you all are paying attention to the news, and I know we all are, that Putin is actually manipulating them at this particular time, because he's also given information to Iran. Do you all think that is true, or do you think that is just fodder for the fire?
I think it's global politics. You know, Putin former KGB, right? And they've had a relationship with Trump for some time, not necessarily the one that the U.S. corporate media has convinced everybody, but they've had some relationship with him some time, maybe not for the reasons we know. And I don't know if we'll ever know, but I think that's global politics. And then, you know, he's looking at his country. He has oligarchs in his country too, but he's more in control of them. So I think global politics has a lot to do with it. I don't think Putin gives a hoot about Donald Trump other than what he can get out of him.
Okay.
Very good point.
I guess I would answer both of those questions with, you know, it's not a wise strategy because it's too unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
There were people. You're right. In fact, I'm going back 2 questions. You're right that I was saying he's something different. I didn't say that in the first book. I said that, you know, we'd have to go a long way to distinguish him from a whole bunch of other presidents. You know, when you take the 12 to 13, depending upon your count, that had us enslaved.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
they,
sir.
you know, yeah. And you know, and you have the with respect to the simianization, you got Thomas Jefferson, you know, comparing us to orangutans in his you know, notes on the state of Virginia. You know,
yes, sir.
In those ways, he is similar to those people. So when you talk about, but in when I at this point, it's not simply narcissism. I said it's narcissism plus sociopathy or antisocial personality disorder. It's sadism, and it's also paranoia. And those are the traits that Hitler had. The predecessor to the CIA had people go and study him and draw a profile on him. And the people in Germany, the ruling class, they thought they were going to manipulate Hitler. You see, and so they banked on that. His psychopathology was very clear. You call him the Fuhrer. You be obsequious. You do those things, but he ended up killing those people and actually becoming, you know, totally unstoppable. And the people that he has doing these things, I heard somebody say today, they're acting like he's not going to be replaced, you know, in 3 years. And the commitment that he's shown in these crazy things that he's doing shows you that he has no intention of relinquishing that office.
That's right.
He has no intention of relinquishing that office. And it's nice to have little formulas about, it's nice to have little formulas about how you think classes are going to act, so on and so forth. And it's just like religion, because when it doesn't work out the way you say, then you take it and you change it. Well, that's because we move from this stage of capitalism to the other stage of capitalism. And I'm not putting down economic analysis, but I'm saying don't minimize psychoanalysis also. Don't minimize psychopathology. This is a very, very sick man.
Yeah.
And I don't know what he would do. I don't know if he would drop an atomic bomb. I don't know. I don't know what he would do. But you can see the pattern, and you can see that us trying to manipulate him by kissing his behind is not is very risky, and I think probably futile strategy. He is the son of a Klansman.
That's right.
He is the son of a Klansman. He sued the United States government rather than to open his housing up to black.
Yes, yes.
And he made money off of public housing.
He was mentored by the man that the
attorney,
investigative journalist for the Voice called the most evil man he'd ever met in all of the thousands of interviews. That's Wayne Barrett. Wayne Barrett said that Roy Cohn, that's the man that mentored Trump, was the most evil man he had ever interviewed. And he said that if you're mentored by a person like that and you like kind of look up to that person like that, then you're soulless. You're starting out without a soul. And Roy Cohn called Trump the closest thing to a genius he had ever met. So you're dealing with it. It's nice to have formulas. It's nice to have comparisons. It's nice to talk about all the presidents having been sick. Certainly taking your enslaved people's teeth and making your teeth for yourself like George Washington did. That's sick. But this, I'm telling you, this guy is the type of sick that can destroy. Hitler destroyed all of Europe. This guy could destroy the entire world.
You know what? Can I just add something on that? First of all, Roy Cohn was the attorney for McCarthy during the McCarthy era. The other thing is that when Trump did this to him, the person who was his mentor, when he found he was gay, he put him in some shack house and just left him there. So if he will do that to Roy Cohn, who was his mentor, what do you think? And for those of you who think we would hope that we have a midterm election. Not trying to scare you. Can't go around talking about vote. You're going to have to really hustle and convince people that they should put their lives on the line to some degree, because it may not be in the cards for us to even have a midterm election. Everybody's looking at from an political analysis, but they're not taking into consideration what Dr. McIntosh is saying. This ain't regular. This is not normal.
So if we all see this, and the question is that you think about all of the people that are around him, all these people that got all these titles. Well, are we also saying that these people are mentally insane as well?
Many of them are sycophants.
Insane, but let's not throw these words around. Insane means that you're incapable of knowing right or wrong. Okay, but do they have their own psychopathology? Yes, they do. They all have their own psychopathology, but the one that's important, they you see them act obsequious to him. You see people around the world do it. You saw when he met over in Asia, and I don't remember what it was, some Asian people, and they were saying, you need to have the Nobel Prize. The people that have given him their Nobel Prize, giving him their Nobel Prize.
Their medals.
They recognize that he's sick, but that's not going to save you. Recognize it.
This was a good conversation. And it's a perfect segue into the next thing that we're going to talk about briefly, and that's where we're going to be talking about the Iran war, and we're going to get into that next section. But thank you so much for coming up for this.
We're also going to get into the ballot, the battle for what's left of the ballot with these fools.
Right, and there's a theme going on tonight in terms of election having consequences, and we might not see. You're right. We might not see another election. We might not. We have no idea what he would do, and maybe no idea. And because everybody's head is, would he use a nuke? Right.
Jonathan,
so I think that's the bottom line of a lot of it.
Jonathan and Edward, you know that Section 2 is before the court next month of the Civil Rights Act, and I would just throw this out. Chief Justice Roberts was the architect of getting rid of the Civil Rights Act in the Reagan administration, and now he's sitting on the court. So I'll leave that with you guys to contemplate.
Well, I want to answer your question on what we should do. The keys for African American or Black people in this country is to survive. If we survive the door of no return, middle patches, working the cotton fields from daybreak till dusk, till night, we can survive Donald Trump. And the key is this: there's something happening in America that's precipitating all of this. In 1970, 83% of the U.S. population was white of European descent. By 1980, it got to 80%. By 1990, it dropped to 75%. In the year 2000, it dropped to 63%. Right now, the white population is at 57%. And that's what that's what's going on. That is
Right.
one population
of a black planet.
When they're talking about replacement theory, that's something that's mainstream in Republican circles. So no, absolutely, right. And I know that we're going to get into that in later when we're talking about voting rights and the things that are so important. But thank you so much for coming out for this section, and we will see you all. So we will see you all soon.
Of our guests, Jonathan.
We're running out of time, but very briefly, just in terms of the like a brief answer. Who is your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group?
I'm still with Dead Prez. What side are you on?
All right. And Dr. McIntosh?
Brother D, and I can't even think of the name of his group, but
how you gonna make a Black Nation Rise?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And Dr. Payne?
Cool D Rap.
D Rap straight out of Philly, baby.
One of the most violent rappers of all history, and I use him as a prime example.
Straight out of Philly. We see you, sir.
But take that with you on the way down.
His best song, Don't Bother Me While Whooping on My Woman.
Wow. All right. Wow. All right. So
he's a prime example.
We will unpack that later. We will unpack that later. We might need you to come back at 8:30 and have a conversation about your musical choice. and let's have a conversation. I think that would be great. I'm not even kidding on that. At some point, we do need to have just a pure hip hop conversation because what you started to say seems real interesting. So thank you so much for coming out, and we will have you back. We'll have you back.
Apologize too around the issue of the time segment because we originally proposed it at a different time, and we appreciate y'all giving y'all the time that you did it and making the adjustments. So I'll take responsibility for the juggle.
But we appreciate it.
Don't do that again. I'm going to come personally to everybody.
Absolutely. That's why we also extended the time too. So we appreciate you.
All right. Be well.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for being here. All right. So
that was an excellent panel.
Yeah, it was. All right. So that was. This next section is talking about the war in Iran. And it's a brief conversation, but because we want to cover it, a conversation every week. We think that Americans are woefully ignorant about what's going on, which is why, or ignorant or don't care, right? But I think a lot of people just don't recognize the things that actually hurt them. And to that extent, we're going to share a map, right? This map is the map of the area. You have Iran, you have Saudi Arabia, you have Oman, Yemen, you have the United Arab Emirates. You have Iran. Iran is huge because there were 90 million people in it. There's Tehran, which is the capital of Iran. Many people say that to understand the situation, you should understand geography. When we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan after 9/11, Afghanistan is right here. You see to the map onto the west of Iran. Iraq is to the east of Iran. And so we literally took over Iraq and we invaded Afghanistan and replaced the Taliban for like 20 years with a different government. And we had been straight enemies with Iran since 1979. In 1979, the United States was friends with Iraq. When Iraq invaded Iran, and this is also really important, Iran has had to prepare for war for since 1979, since the revolution. When they fought Iraq, Iraq invaded them, right? They saw that it was new, it was weak, and that Iran was largely a Shia country. And one way, and forgive me for saying this, but one way to think of Iran and the Shia population is that, and correct me, and I'm oversimplifying, and I admit this is an oversimplification, but you know how all Latinos will talk about Puerto Ricans, right? And like there's like a hierarchy like of Latinos, and they always like just like in a conversation like, oh, but the Puerto Ricans, they don't own their own land, right? Like that's kind of like Shia Muslims and the rest of the Sunni world. So you have a situation where you have Saudi Arabia, powerful, right?
Now I'm gonna come
Sunni.
at that. Let me respond to what you just put out.
All right.
And this is, and I'm gonna try and
They've been oppressed for a
use,
long time, right?
well, you know, that's relative. See, before there was Iran, there was Persia,
Right.
right? And the Persian Empire was an empire of fighters, very, very serious fighters. Afghanis, for and not as large an area in terms of population, but have a long history of being a population of fighters, being
Fair.
indomitable. Now,
Yes.
now further, Shia Islam is kind of looked at as a left offshoot of Islam. Okay, and
Right.
so I mean, that
As in-
should
and-
not
and
be
that's
dismissed in this equation that you're laying out. I see where you're going.
because it is right. Like they you could look at them as a oppressed minority that had to fight, right? And especially when they came to power in 1979.
And they were oppressed.
Before that,
They're
right?
gonna stop.
But before that, you have Shia populations in Lebanon, you have Shia populations in Saudi Arabia, and there you have Shia populations in Syria, and they're always the oppressed minority who's not in control. As a matter of fact, in Iraq, Iraq is a majority Shia, but prior to the invasion of Iraq, it was controlled by a minority Sunni population. So in multiple areas, they are oppressed. Lebanon, you have a Shia minority that would translate into Hezbollah, right? And with the help of Iran after 1979 and like in the 80s. But again, you have oppressed minorities that have to fight. And so can you imagine when after you're talking about like as Baba Zayed was talking about, like close to centuries of oppression, you have the Ayatollah come to power in 1979. And to some extent, and again, I'm putting this in oversimplified terms, but imagine Puerto Ricans getting their, Puerto Rico becomes a nation and Bad Bunny's the spiritual leader, right? Like, you know, and I know I'm putting this in the serious thing, the serious thing in playful terms. You said what?
Or he's an ancestor now, of course, but someone like Don Pedro Albizu Campos becomes a leader.
Right, but the reason why I said that is everybody knows who Bad Bunny is.
I know.
You got to break down who. You got to break the other thing down, right? Like, and that's why it's a playful thing, right? Like, as in, he's wildly popular based on, right, having some sense of pride, right? Like, we just had the Super Bowl. There was a lot of Boricua pride in what was going on. It's culturally relevant and important. Right. And you have Iran flexing its national power for an oppressed minority in the region. So it has power within the region based on identification of an oppressed minority with underdogs who came to power, and real underdogs because they had a democracy, and we talked about this last week. They had a democracy in 1953. The United States helped overthrow that democracy. So when we say we're doing this for rights, etc., that's crazy, right? And we're running. I want to do this quickly because I know we have something at 7. So we look at the area. We look at how large this area is. We look at how they got to their country rose based on a Western resistance, right? Like when the Ayatollah came to power in 1979 in the Iranian Revolution, they came to power resisting the West, who had objectively screwed them over. We took away a democratically elected Iran and replaced them with a Shah, which means king, who became murderous, who was like, he killed a lot of people, he imprisoned a lot of people, he was widely hated.
They're trying to lift up his little granddad, his little grandson, to do the same
Right.
thing. They wish
Right.
they could.
So that's why when you see in the news, you see mention of like the Shah's grandson or someone related to the Shah who they want to bring to power. It's clearly like a spit in the face of their whole history. There's a lot of ignorance that goes on. Apparently, when the United States invaded Iraq, they didn't know the difference between Sunni and Shia. They didn't know the history, right? So they didn't know that
They knew it, they dismissed its importance.
Well, I don't even think they knew it. I don't even think they understood it.
See, intelligence is not just what you get, it's how you treat it once you get it.
That's fair. That's fair. But they were generally shocked when they fired all the Sunnis in the Ba'athist Party, and when like massive revolution occurred after that, right? They were shocked that the war in Iraq basically strengthened Iran, who we didn't really mess with, right? They did not understand. And I think that there's a widespread ignorance of people who run foreign policy, and that because I think they don't think they have to care. Like, I think that they're like, hey, people will do what we want to do, and we don't have to care. We don't have to know. We don't have to recognize. And those are the people that other people put in decision-making power. But the last thing, right, before we move on to the next part, and this is the part that
you ain't gonna let me bite this apple good. What's up?
So stupid, right? Like when people look at this part of the map and they look at this part, it's called the Strait of Hormuz. Now, most high school debaters who've had debates about this region, who've had any type of basic debate about Iran or action in Iran, this little piece of this little strait right here is what people talk about, because this is the Persian Gulf. A lot of oil from Saudi Arabia, from Kuwait, from Iraq, all come down the Persian Gulf. And they go, all this is Iran, right? Iran, all this coast is Iran. All this coast is Iran. Now, maybe if I wanted to avoid Iran, maybe I could go down this coast, go over here, right? But when I get up here, when I get up to the Strait of Hormuz, they can see you. So when people are talking about right now, Iran is mining the Strait of Hormuz, here's this little bit of land that, hear me now, 20% of the world's oil goes through. Let me repeat this. 20%, 1 in every 5 barrels that for the whole world come through here. So most people who strategize against Iran understand there's certain limitations if you don't want to send the world into a tailspin based on pissing off them so much that they close the Strait of Hormuz. So even if you have small skirmishes, whatever, you don't piss them off so much that they have to mine over here, because, you know, you don't want to cut your nose to spite your face. Mm-hmm. This is also makes me think, because I don't think Trump was like, we want $200 barrels of oil, right? Literally, he's opening up, right? He's taking off sanctions of Russia so that oil gets cheaper, right? When they're fighting in the Ukraine. So all that is just crazy. But again, the way that maps work, geopolitics is literally about geography and politics. And we need to understand the geography of the region. Iran felt threatened because to its east, the United States literally overthrew the government. To the west, the United States literally overthrew the government. They're in the middle. they knew that this day would come since 1979 because we had already messed with Iran in 1953 when we overthrew their democratically elected leader and, you know, installed the Shah. So that all that to say, look at your geography, educate yourself. This is called my public service announcement because I think that a lot of people are talking about what's going on. We think of a war in Iraq, we think of this region, but we don't see it. So that's why we put the map up here so that people can, like, go look at a map of the region.
Let me
Go
expand.
see where these are, right? Dubai is mad because this is where people go to vacation. Look at where Dubai is. Look at where Iraq is. Dubai, Iraq. Dubai, Iraq. United Arab Emirates, Iraq. Qatar, Iraq. Bahrain, Iraq, right? Like, you can't, like, they might not get along, but they got to get along to some extent for them to be stable. You can't party in Dubai when this strait is like littered with mines, right? That probably messes up the view on the beach. Just saying.
Let me
That's
expand. Let me expand the map because I don't want y'all to miss this also, right? And this is, I want to bring this. I want to connect the whole question of Israel and Gaza to this equation, Israel and the Palestinian people to this equation. Once upon a time, when the non-aligned movement was the order of the day, there was a broader unity of that region in solidarity with the Palestinian people, right? But because of the oil wealth that created a different kind of class orientation among all of those little nations that you just named, Jonathan, they would ultimately wind up bedding down with the U.S. agenda, right? And and pulled away from their solidarity with the Palestinian people, right? And so here and there sits Iran, one of the few countries, right, that had some resources, that has some real resources, and has some principled solidarity with the people, right? And so this obsession with Iran ain't just coming from the United States; it's coming from Israel.
That's right,
Israel. So we need to understand that that piece is also a part of this equation. Israel is hell bent on taking all of what's left of the Palestinians' land to manifest their manifest destiny. Just that settler colonial state is on the verge of doing what this settler colonial state did in the 19th century, right? And they want no meaningful opposition to that. And they want to be upheld as the lone superpower dictating the order of the region. That's what they want, right? And so we need to understand, Israel, and it's a shame that countries like Saudi and all those other oil-rich folks that also have U.S. military bases, right, are not sticking with the solidarity that was once the order of the day, because that would have checked that. That would have been the balance in the region that the region needs, and it would have been a bulwark against some of this crazy violence that we're seeing, and we could see more of if our solidarity does not emerge in a way within that space, within those spaces, and amongst our spaces to check both the checkbook that has the blank check that Israel gets from the United States for their militarization. So we just want to make sure that we bring all of that together.
Absolutely, right?
I think
especially when
Zaid is absolutely on point. But what I would add to that, Zaid, is that some seem to say that the attack that in the war that is currently going on is really an Israel war, right?
Yes, exactly. That's my point.
That America is fighting their war using America's resources because they want total control of that entire region.
and they're pushing their position and obsession with privilege as far as they can possibly take it.
And so, for just for context, right? You see in southern Lebanon over here, that's where Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is an Iranian-funded political organization inside of Lebanon, right? The United States calls them a terrorist organization. They are an organization that is actually part of the politics of Lebanon. And they have a military that is almost, if not even more powerful than the Lebanese military. They are at they are often at odds with Israel because of Israel's
Solidarity.
well, I mean, it's not really solidarity. It's really a lot of it is comes from the Israeli invasion of Beirut that was based on Palestinians fighting from southern Lebanon.
That's the
And
solidarity I'm talking about.
right, but it was also self-interest, right? It wasn't just solidarity because they weren't necessarily friends with the Palestinians because the Palestinians were basically, many people blamed Palestinians for that southern incursion, right? Like, so it's complicated, right? Like, so there is, so it wasn't just like they rose based on Lebanon not being able to defend itself because it was caught in the middle of a war between the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Israel, and Lebanon got massacred in the 80s. And it became almost like a failed state in the 80s based on that, right? Like, so there's a lot of history there, but Hezbollah rose up. And to some extent, you could say that there became certain solidarity with the way in which people were treated. Like, and also you have Hamas, who is the highly religious part of the Palestinian movement that is situated in Gaza itself. But even that becomes complicated because part of the reason why Hamas rose was because Israel wanted a challenger to the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And to note, the Palestinian Liberation Organization was a secular organization comprised of Muslims and Christians, right? So this area becomes very complicated given the ways in which the United States, Israel, they start funding people who later start attacking them. We talked last week, and again, I recommend the documentary Bitter Rivals because it talks about how Saudi Arabia, who is our ally, who is where there are military bases in Saudi Arabia. There's lots of weapons that we give them. They're one of our major major arms partners. So when we were in debating about,
let me tell you something, and this Saudi as a client state, Saudi as the caregiver of Mecca, the spiritual center of Islam. During a Hajj some years ago, Saudis militarily attacked Shias from Iran. Right. Whereas, there should have been a basic bridge of solidarity within the faith that did not happen.
But they don't think it's. But many don't think it's the same faith. And
it's the 40s. And
I think that like the split between Sunni and Shia is very similar to the legendary split and the wars between Catholics and Protestants. I don't think we should underestimate the way in which that helps to shape a lot of this, right? Unnecessarily.
That's why I said Shia is looked at in the Sunni Muslim world as a left of what the Orthodox Islam should be.
And you're putting it in very nice terms, right? Like I've heard it described in ways that were far more derogatory, but in terms of how Sunni, Shia, right? Like in terms, and again, we're making generalities, but generalities that are within geopolitics that are actually very relevant and have been very important in the recent, like I'm talking about last 20 to 40 years history of the region, right? So the whole 1979, the Iranian Revolution kind of shook Saudi Arabia because they have an oppressed Shia minority. And an oppressed Shia minority is getting hope from Iran. You have oppressed Shia in Iraq who are getting like both support and hope from Iran. So during the first Gulf War, when we and our just for our viewers, we had a guest for 7 o'clock who is not here yet, and Donna, you reached back out. All right, who was supposed to be here at who we thought was going to be here at 7. So we're just continuing this conversation. But when she gets here, we will switch to that. Again, we're going to be interviewing hopefully everyone who is running for office. But when you're looking at the this particular part and what you were talking about, is that we shouldn't underestimate the ways in which the difference and the difference between Sunni and Shia is shaping a lot of the region, right? Like, and the way you brought out is that Zayed brought out is that there are many who are like affiliated with whether it's Saudi Arabia, Jordan, uh, uh, Iraq, were affiliated with the United States and the United Arab Emirates, right? Qatar, they're allied with the United States in that. And you're saying like the term you used was client states, but they were friendly and they chose because they could basically they could all make money, which not a bad decision if you're talking about hey, we want to make money. Here's how we can make money. We could be really good. Saudi Arabia has done very, very well in that relationship. Um, but if the United States looks at it in terms of where did the ideology come from that actually caused terrorism in the United States, that would be Saudi Arabia. And that would be the movements that that the United States paid for, as in when we didn't like that Russia or the Soviet Union, and all this was part of the Soviet Union. We didn't like it when they invaded Afghanistan, even though Afghanistan had a secular socialist government. And so we, with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, funded and trained the Mujahideen, who are very ultra orthodox type of Islam that it has its birthplace in Saudi Arabia, but it is the same type of understanding that Osama bin Laden has. As a matter of fact, Osama bin Laden is from Saudi Arabia, from a wealthy family in Saudi Arabia. He's from a very wealthy construction family in Saudi Arabia, and the caves of Afghanistan he helped build. So when you're looking at who has actually threatened Iran, where did these threats come from? A lot of these threats came from U.S. intervention over the years. Like our ally helped fuel the spread of a very conservative, ultra conservative understanding of Islam that would lead to like these ideologies of Al Qaeda and ISIS, right? And here's one other thing.
The African continent that translates into Boko Haram and others.
Right. It translates into the people around the world that are actually violating human rights and are really killing lots of other people within those particular areas. One of our, like, this is Afghanistan, this is Iraq. One of the allies of the United States in fighting Al Qaeda, and I don't mean allies in the United States, but I mean allies in the fight against Al Qaeda, was Iran.
And Jonathan, after you finish your thought, our guest has arrived. Okay,
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. So again, this was just our public service announcement. We want to have a conversation about this. We had the entire conversation with a map up. Look at a map of the region. Look and see, especially when you're looking at where Iran is, and this place right here, because your oil prices are going up because of this geography. Iran, big, putting mines
This
right here
geography in that class.
because 20% of the world's oil goes right through here. Right. So that is our public service for this week. Hopefully, some people at least learned a little bit more about this absolutely stupid war that the United States has engaged in. So, welcome to our next segment. We have Linda Lloyd, who has been on our show multiple times before as a candidate, and I believe as just a person who has done lots of things within the community. Welcome. She is running for the Newark Councilperson at large in this race, and we always want to have everyone who's running on the show because we believe in civic discourse. So we want 20 minutes to introduce yourself, to answer some basic questions, and to say why you should be the council person at large. So my first question to you is, Linda Lloyd. Well, first, welcome to All Politics Are Local, and you are running for council person at large. Why? What is there about your biography that makes you good for the at-large council position for the city of Newark?
Well, one, excuse my tardiness. I had a different understanding of time, and I'm running from a school interviewing students for summer positions. And I also want to thank you all for this opportunity this evening. I'm so excited to be here as a candidate many years later. As a candidate for at-large, and I just want to make sure that I start by thanking you so much for this opportunity. And I think that I deserve to have one of the 4 at-large seats. I literally have dedicated my life to the city in service, but not just in service, right? Also, I have studied, political science, public administration. And so I've always wanted to use government as a vehicle to help create a better quality of life in my city. And so I went to study it. I've been involved in different organizations. Taking up the streets with Baba here is one way. I'm also a licensed realtor and helping shape community in that way. Sister Donna is also my sister in real estate. So over the years, I've spent much time just trying to figure it out, whether it's working in community organizations, teaching young people, organizing my peers, just really bumping my head all around, just trying to figure out how could we collectively work together in order to help move our city forward so that we can have a more equitable city that represents the needs of all of the residents and not just some of the residents.
When we look at the run for office, the theme of tonight is elections have consequences. And we know that there are certain issues that remain present inside of Newark. And these are some questions that we're going to be asking to all of the candidates. What are your thoughts about the budget right now in Newark, the state of it, what's going on with it, and what solutions would you have for the issues that Newark's budget has right now? How would you describe it, and what would you do about it?
Well, I think there's enough commentary going around online and in community about the status of the budget and what's happening with it and how it unfortunately continuously is not passed on time. And one of the things that I would like to focus on as an elected official in a legislative capacity is accountability. And so one of the ways that I think that we can get around, waiting until the last minute or having challenges at the end, trying to have a budget prepared, is that we have accountability along the way. So I would like to see quarterly hearings, if you will, with the different department heads and the major components of the budget so that we can know, okay, what have you spent so far? what do you project to spend? And so by the time we get to possibly the third quarter of our budget calendar year, we will have a better idea of what we need to do to best have a prepared budget. And again, the administration are the ones who prepare the budget to present to the council. And the council can be assertive, right, in their communication and encouraging the administration to do so. But when we put this in place to make it a quarterly check-in versus a voluntarily check-in, or an annual check-in, we'll have the ability to have oversight of what the administration is doing with the budget more in a more feasible way versus trying to have it all at one time.
Another issue that is
Okay.
no, that's me. My mic
Okay.
is off. Another issue that is always important to people is the issue of crime. Newark has record low murder rates, but there's still often, especially in many areas of Newark, a feeling about what to do about crime, not just in terms of murder, but property crimes, theft, etc. Right? There are a lot of quality of life issues that deal with that. And everyone has, and I think part of governing is that you always need an ideology or a plan or a vision that's based on how you would think about public safety. So what do you think about how Newark has dealt with public safety in the past, even in the past 4 years or 8 years? And what is your view of public safety? Like, what would you do? What would you fight to put in place? So what do you think about what's been going on? And what would you do, either the same or different?
Sure. So everything is not all bad and everything is not all good. So I want to talk about what I think is going well in terms of a national model that the city is using now. And I say national model because I actually learned about this when I was living and studying, working at the NEK Foundation when I lived in Baltimore while I was attending grad school. And I learned about how they were having alternative approaches to public safety through things like we have here with the Newark Community Street Team. I think that is a good idea. I think that it is proven across the country to have worked. And I'm sure that is what those type of interventions are contributing to our lower percentages. But when I'm thinking about crime, I'm not thinking about, and you're mostly going to hear me talk about saying what we can do or what I can do from a legislative perspective, again, because some of the things that we have challenges with, it's important that we understand what level of government is responsible for what and what you actually can do. And so how I would like to address crime is through employment and opportunities, right? Because poverty is often a result of crime. Unless someone is dealing with some sort of like mental illness or things of that nature, but if you're committing crimes, especially if it's a robbery or something of that nature, that means that you lack financial resources that you need in order to provide for yourself and for your family. And so I'm looking at taking a step back and looking at what the city needs more broadly, not just for survival and enhancement now, but years to come when I'm no longer in office. So I would like to see, for organizations or businesses that receive contracts from the city over a certain dollar amount, and folks who receive tax abatements through like a pilot payment in lieu of taxes, that they are required to pay into a fund that will create apprenticeships for 16 to 24-year-olds in our city, leaving a small percentage, somewhere maybe like around 15%, for older residents who would like to participate. And the purpose of this pipeline is that a lot of times when we look for corporations or businesses to hire our residents, they give us the feedback that we would love to hire, Newark residents, but we don't find that they're qualified. And so by legislating, creating a fund, right, to have the funds to train these people in the jobs that are on demand here and around the city, we can now begin to create a pipeline where we can have our young people go from high school and have a direct pathway to some of the anchor institutions and businesses here in the city. Now, I'm not naive to think that all of the jobs will come from our city, but there is a huge gap that can be filled by our residents with proper training. And we don't want to leave it up to be a voluntary thing. We want it to be legislated to be a mandatory thing if you are receiving any type of abatement, again, or contracts beyond a certain dollar amount. Right now, we have legislation in the city that requires these contractors to hold job fairs, but we want to make sure that we take it a step further by filling the gap of education and preparation so that we can have a full pipeline of economic mobility.
You're muted, Jonathan.
You're muted.
Yeah, I keep forgetting to unmute myself. But the other issue that is incredibly important in the city right now is affordability. Many people are talking about how they can't afford the rent, they can't afford homes, they can't afford their heating, right? And people are talking about gentrification. People are talking about the ways in which they feel they're being pushed out. All these buildings are coming in, and many people will say these buildings are not for us. What is your understanding of the current policies that deal with housing and gentrification, and what would you prescribe that would be different, if any? Or like, because again, there's some things you might agree with, some things you might disagree with. Where do you stand? What is your vision when it comes to housing affordability, housing and affordability?
Sure. So I also want to name that affordability as it relates to housing and many things is a national crisis. So it's not just something that we're facing here in Newark. And I know we recently, the municipal council passed the inclusionary zoning law to provide for a level of affordable housing for folks who are developing new structures here. And while I think that the legislation is good, it definitely needs to be revisited in terms of expanding the number of units, right, that are qualified for affordable housing based on what the person is seeking to build based on how many units that they have. So I think that we can make some changes to that current legislation, possibly moving it from 80% to 60% AMI. Another area that I would like to see expand is that right now the city has a—
What do you mean by 60% AMI? Can you just explain that concept?
Sure. So it depends on the number of units that the person is building, that they are required by law to have a number of units be affordable for people who fall within 80% of the area median income. Is that clear?
Yes. Okay, that's fine.
And so what I'm offering to be able to be more inclusive of people who don't necessarily make as much money. And then, we talked about this before. I saw, maybe it was last week or the week before last, you had Councilwoman Amina Bay on, where she talked about, the challenge that the city of Newark is facing because we're in Essex County and we have all of these wealthy towns that are contributing to the AMI, which is not fair because the average or the median income for a family in Newark is around $52,000. So it doesn't leave much space for more residents to be able to qualify for some of these new units that are being developed en masse. And so another thing that the city currently has that I would like to see expanded is they currently have a partnership with the Housing Authority, Invest Newark, and NACA, where residents who have Section 8 vouchers can take that Section 8 voucher and purchase a house through the NACA program. And while you can currently do that if you have a Section 8 voucher, you don't necessarily need the partnership of Invest Newark or the Housing Authority per se. With NACA in particular, they allow you to buy up to a 4-family and mixed use property, right? And so, yes, we want more homeowners in the city because we need to have a larger tax base, but also the opportunity to own a multifamily home could be very helpful for families to be able to sustain their properties and become business owners in that way. And the current program, you're only allowed to buy a single family house, which is great if that's what you want. But if you want to become, like I said, a business owner, or you want to have some assistance with covering your mortgage, you should be able to have access to purchase a multifamily home. It also would be great to include residents who don't have Section 8 vouchers, right? So working with Invest Newark, at one point, the city had a plan to, load off all of the current homes and the homes that they had and the land to Invest Newark, for Invest Newark to then get it to residents that way through like the land bank and other programs that they have. But I think it can be expanded by holding on to some of these homes, right? And creating a partnership with the city where folks will be able to purchase a house through the NACA program that maybe needs a little TLC, right? And be able to become a homeowner in that way. So you're getting a house under market value, having the ability to have some assistance from these institutions to help it become move-in ready for you and your family.
So John, I was wondering if I could ask Ms. Lloyd a question. Ms. Lloyd, welcome to All Politics Are Local.
Thank you.
You alluded to Deputy Mayor Muhammad and Councilwoman Bay, who were on the show, and I'm sure you probably heard them. They were talking about this whole idea around what abatement is, right? And so they were explaining.
I actually didn't catch that. I heard Councilwoman Bay, but I didn't hear the Deputy Mayor.
Okay, well, you can, if you get a chance, you could probably go back, look at last week's show. Okay. They were giving us a lesson because John had asked them a profound question to, explain it, because, most of us don't really understand that in its pejorative sense in terms of what these folks are getting, why so many of these builders come into town, why they get these abatements and so forth. I want to take it in another direction. We once had Charles Barron on from Brooklyn. And when Charles Barron was in the council in New York City, what he said is that no one could come into Brooklyn and build houses and charge rents that were above what the median income was for the residents. So in other words, when we talk about affordable, right, and there was some news that was breaking today around what happened in Brooklyn and what happened around the new stadium and so forth in Brooklyn, that they played out Jay-Z, and Jay-Z wound up helping getting all of the folks who were below the poverty line moved out of this area. I bring all of that up to say, as a council person, if Charles Barron could do in New York and not allow builders to come in and build homes or build apartments, and then put them in such a position where they could say, well, we're only going to have 10 apartments that we're going to make so-called affordable. And remember that word affordable, what do you mean by that? Because, you can say it's affordable to you or me if we make six figures, but what about the income that Councilwoman said the median income in Newark at $37,000? Well, they can't afford $2,500. They can't afford $3,600, right? So can the council, as a council person, like what Charles did, sort of say, well, we're not going to give any abatements. We're not going to allow anybody to come and build unless they make sure that the apartments that they're building are going to be affordable for people who are making $37,000.
Sure. I mean, you could say anything, right? But what is the implication of what you're saying? So I am a daughter of Newark, South Orange Avenue and 7th Street, like graduate of Westside High School, family still here, right? Definitely want to make sure that if you choose to live, work, and play here in the city, that you can, if you choose to do so, that you can. But just thinking about it from both sides, right? And I hope I'm not digging myself in a hole here, but Mr. Alston, I know that you are a debate coach, right? So if I'm going to be on the council and thinking about how to move the city forward, I have to think about all aspects. I have to think about the residents, absolutely, the beginning, middle, and end. But then how do you also attract people? So first of all, Newark is not New York. And New York has many resources that we just don't have just because of population and budget and things of that nature. But if I am a developer, right, what is my incentive to build a certain type of housing? And so if we say that, right, then we need to make sure that if the city doesn't have the ability to give the builder some sort of subsidies, that we have some sort of relationship with the state so that the state could then subsidize. Because when when a developer is building, although we want what they're building to be accessible for us and for us to be able to afford to pay, the cost of building does not change, right? Whether Sister Donna, rents this apartment at market value, or Baba rents the apartment at affordable or low income rate, it's going to cost the same to build. And if a person is not making any money, they're not going to have an incentive to build. And so that means that on a government side, and maybe some partnerships with other corporations, right? Because we want to encourage people to come and build here, we have to help them fill in the gaps. One of the things that I like that's happening in the city of Newark, that it seems to be a lot of promotion and a lot of encouragement of local people who are from here and live here to develop, right? And it looks like although it doesn't necessarily happen in a smooth transition all of the time, it does seem to be some opportunity for local people to get in and on opportunities to develop. And so affordability, according to the law, is 30%, or not the law, but the rule is that it's 30% of your income. But also when you're going to buy a house, I also want to let people know that just because you make six figures also doesn't mean that you can afford to pay $3,000 a month for rent. Because if I am someone who graduated from Newark, right, or Newark Public Schools, or I went to school here, my family is here, I don't want to live with my family until I'm 40 or 45. I want to live on my own. But I also have to pay for my education. Maybe I didn't get enough scholarships to cover all of my costs. So when you're purchasing a home, they also look at your debt to income ratio. So depending on your debt to income ratio as a six-figure earner, you may not be able to afford these very expensive apartments either. So I think that, yes, to answer your question directly, we could absolutely make a rule that if you are going to build here, right, it all needs to be affordable, or whatever it is that, Councilman Brother Charles Barron said in New York. But in order for that to happen, right, let's just say this is what I want. It can't just be me. You also need that's correct. You also need at least 4 other council members to be able to back you on that. And so that is also an area to consider as well. So we can legislate whatever we want, but we also have to think about what are the implications of the laws that we pass in the city.
And I know we're nearing the end of our time, but I just wanted to...
Go ahead, Jonathan. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I know we're nearing the end of our time, but I just wanted to ask a question that I was going to ask to most of the at-large candidates. Newark is a large, multiracial, multicultural city. And there is some people who have a perception that there has been some tension, right? Like in terms of, we look at some things that happened in terms of global studies, the school. We look at other tensions there. What is your vision of race relations within the city? And how are you forming your appeal to all of Newark?
That's a good question.
Well, first, let me ask you this. Are you familiar with what happened at Global Studies?
So to my understanding, there have been several incidents, and people feel that there is a culture that people of a certain ethnicity and language speaking background have been disrespectful, right? And kind of trying to dehumanize in some ways another group of students and also staff. And so I personally don't want to get into the weeds about what happened at that school, because I know that it has been litigated And I also know that the Newark Municipal Council does not have direct control over the schools. So as given my opinion as a resident, right, from that perspective, I think that is something that is very serious, and it should be looked into. It should
and
be.
Again, the question wasn't about that school in particular. It was really about the underlying things of it, right? Like, as in, what is your vision for the city? Do you think that, what is your vision of how race functions within the city? Are there underlying tensions, and how would you appeal to what is your appeal to everyone in Newark?
Well, I only started to say that because then Edward asked me specifically about.
Right, I got you.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
And we were only, I was only asking you that so that if you understood what happened there in a larger context with, how this city, because even, conversations I've had with Mitty, those are real, what Jonathan is asking you, those are real issues in this city.
I'm aware. And so I think from a leadership perspective, it's important to be inclusive, so you see this For the Love of Newark in the background. We also had a Spanish version of Por el Amor de Newark, right? And I do realize that we have, one of the largest Portuguese populations. We have a very large, also Haitian Creole speaking population here in the city of Newark. And so I think from a leadership perspective, it's about inclusivity. So For the Love of Newark is a movement that we started to engage residents all across the city, right? We did have the survey available in both English and Spanish. And the premise was to ask people about what they love about Newark and what they want to see more of. So I think the foundation of my campaign and my journey to City Hall has been very inclusive, right? Making sure that we have representation, or at least trying to engage members of the community from all parts of the community, right? So I do think that is really important. Are there racial tensions in the city? Sure, right? Because people have certain thoughts and concepts about other groups of people based on maybe their personal experience, based on their culture, maybe based on what they see on television, or maybe something that they heard of that someone else experienced. And I think a way to get around that is, well, not to get around it, but a way to help, right, is the accountability piece that I spoke about earlier. So if we had some sort of dashboard or some way to see like what resources each part of the city are receiving. So that means all of the wards, right? And so we can look at a place and say, okay, the East Ward got this based on their population. The South Ward got this based on their population, and we can see it in real time. And we won't have to feel that, oh man, the North Ward was able to get these things because of their connections with this stuff. And then the West Ward, we kind of missed out. For the things that we allocate in terms of our budget, what the priorities are in the city, we'll be able to help manage it that way. But then also outside of government, that whole tension piece is really for leaders in the community from different backgrounds to be able to come together, right? If leadership cannot come together and residents see that is a fuel for them to not be able to, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the note there. That is a fuel for them to not necessarily be motivated to want to, connect with other residents. So I'm aware of some of the division in the city, but honestly, I'm not thinking about that in a way of feeding into that. I want to be a leader that represents all of the community in the city in all 5 wards. And I want to be able to show, not just say that I am, but show that I am based on my legislative priorities and also based on the budget and the way that we hold, in addition to how we hold the city accountable.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Linda.
I know that because I know that we have with other candidates, we have a limited amount of time. And so Donna, ask, but we just want to make sure we keep the candidates roughly equal.
Well, thank you for being here, and hopefully the opportunity you'll be able to come back. Ed did talk about New York, and I will say, I just wanted to make a statement. What makes New York and another's in Georgia, specifically Atlanta, is that they have community boards that developers have to, not can, they have to go before when they are doing development in communities. So I appreciate that you spoke to that. When I speak, I want to speak from a legislative standpoint, knowing your lane. So I would encourage that would be something that, community boards around the development that you look into, because that would be helpful if it's more of a mandate than they should. And then next, you've been here before. So when you're doing the work preparing for your election and out meeting and greeting people, is there a hip hop artist or individual that you listen to?
Well, Hove is my favorite rapper.
Okay.
And there is almost a Hove line for everything in this business. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, it would be Jay-Z for those who don't know who Hove is.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on. We will have you back.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's an honor and pleasure to have you. And you've been here in other capacities, and you will be back in many capacities. So congratulations. Well, good luck in what you're doing. Congratulations for the stuff that you've done.
That's right.
And I want to say, did people, if they want to reach out to you, how do they reach out to you?
Thank you so much for asking. So my website is lindalloyd.com, LYNDALLOYD. Shameless plug. Today is March 13th. I picked my ballot position yesterday, which is B13. So I'm asking everybody if they could donate at least $13 to me today. It would help us go a long way in the campaign. On Instagram and TikTok, you can also find me at Linda Lloyd for City Council. Linda Lloyd for City Council on both IG and Instagram. Thank you. I'm sorry, IG.
Zay, repeat that.
You asked the question. What is it? What is your website?
LindaLloyd.com. LYNDALLOYD.com.
So Rahman is LYNDA. Rahman Muhammad, not LI. It's LY Rahman.
All right. So take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, one last thing. What's your I was going to ask, what's her position? She said, what did she say?
B13.
Okay, great.
B as in boy 13 and donate 13.
Okay.
Friday the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hey, I think this is for you, Donna.
Rahman said, yes, sir. I just want you to be right.
All right.
You know what's interesting, John, before we go to the next guest? I think, by her asking for $13, you know what that reminds me of?
What?
Do you remember when Obama was running for president? Remember?
That's where it comes from.
Yeah. Remember, he used to send out those texts and ask people for $5?
Yes, that's right.
And he never asked people because he had this idea that if enough people give me $13, I don't need to ask people for a $50 bill, right? Just give me $5, and he would. Remember, he would outraise Hillary Clinton like crazy.
That's true.
Yeah, campaign strategies after that. Yeah.
Like our audience, who never gave the contributions, could give $5.
Yeah,
that's the strategic point of that.
That's ingenious. I like what she just did. That was
major strategies came after that. Well, welcome. Go ahead, Jonathan.
All right. So, and I'm going to give this off to Zaid as well. But in this part of our show, we are talking about, like, the whole show has been dedicated to elections have consequences. Mm-hmm. And we've been talking about, like, different things that have come up within different elections. This section is from Selma to the SAVE Act. And we're going to be talking about voting rights. And we're going to be talking about that with Larry Hamm and Nuzhat Chowdhury. Mm-hmm. And please correct me on the way you say your name if I did not get that right.
You got it.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
All right, so Zaid, start your introduction.
Well, the background for this particular conversation at this particular moment is twofold. But from a historic vantage point, we just observed the anniversary of what is known as Bloody Sunday, March 7th, 1965, when your friends, the police, attacked a peaceful, nonviolent march for voting rights, led by John Lewis and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, in an effort to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, something that was captured in real time, and there was a trove of casualties of that violence. It was a very spectacle attack, totally unwarranted, totally unmerited, that reflected the depth of the racism and the violence of Jim Crow segregated Alabama circa 1965. Several weeks later, by virtue of being embarrassed by what the whole country saw, President Lyndon Johnson at the time ordered federal troops to accompany any effort to redo the march. And so several weeks later, the march actually did take place and became a much larger march. And many consider that being catalytic to Johnson himself ultimately signing the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Fast forward to 2025, the Voting Rights Act is under attack. You heard Linda Carter earlier, just in passing, mention that the second arm of the Voting Rights Act is before the Supreme Court, a Supreme Court that has a Supreme Court justice who was the architect for coming at the Voting Rights Act in the Nixon-Bush era, right? And I'm talking about John Roberts. And you have a president who's becoming unhinged, some of us think, who is now telling the Congress that he's not going to sign any bills until they pass the SAVE Act and put it on his desk. And the SAVE Act is a bill of voter suppression, right? Meanwhile, in New Jersey, organizations like the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, who Nuzhat represents, is pushing for a bill that makes voting and the registering of voting and the actual right to vote far more accessible than it's ever been in this state. And so they're going one way and we going another, right? So it's important that people understand that at this particular critical moment, the right to vote, as we have known it since 1965, is seriously under attack. And it requires a response from us that is mobilized and organized to the fullest. So Nuzhat, you jump on in. You can build on how I introduced that. You will be joined by Lawrence Hamm, who just came back. Did you go down to Selma this year?
I wasn't able to go down this year, unfortunately, but I have in the past. Yep.
Yes. Right. Well, Lawrence Hamm just came back from Selma, and he will be joining in the Mississippi Moment. Right. So jump in and tell us about that part that, I mean, the last time I looked, now, I know most of y'all are Democrats, right? And the New Jersey Democrats have been really making me scratch my head in a very Soprano State way, because they have had the opportunity to do several powerful things that they just haven't done, like the Immigrant Trust Directive, right? Not being signed in the law, like the bill that you're talking about not being put forward. And of course, a strong CCRB bill for real police accountability not being. We had a Democratic governor, Democratic Senate, Democratic legislature. What's happening?
It's
what they missing.
Honestly, I hear your frustration and I share it. We have been fighting for a New Jersey Voting Rights Act here in New Jersey for 3.5 years now.
How about that?
3.5 years, we have had this pending legislation. In that time, there have been other states in the country that have passed their own Voting Rights Act. Last year, Colorado passed theirs, Minnesota passed theirs. Our neighbors, New York and Connecticut, passed theirs a few years ago. There's no reason why New Jersey should not be acting with the urgency that all voters are feeling right now, given all of the different attacks that are happening across the board on democracy. So, you mentioned that the federal VRA is under attack. It has been under attack since 2013. it seems as though every single year there's another Supreme Court case that is brought in order to weaken the federal VRA. The federal VRA of 1965, that at the height of its power really gave us our federal voting rights protections and really protected racial discrimination from occurring at the polls. It was wildly successful, considered one of the most important and successful pieces of civil rights legislation this country has ever passed.
Yes,
in 2013, the Supreme Court went in the case Shelby County v. Holder, gutted the heart of the federal VRA. It took out what was called the pre-clearance program, which stopped states that had already had a history of racial discrimination at the polls from passing voting policies and voting procedures before there was another level of oversight. So before it even went to harm and suppress voters, there was an additional level of oversight that those now in 2013, the Supreme Court said that the formula with which that particular program ran was unconstitutional. So that part of the VRA has been non-functional since 2013. And what we've seen is that because of that, there has been just a slew of voter suppression laws across the country. Yes. And over the past few years, there have been more and more cases about redistricting maps, about attacking the legal tools that the federal VRA gives us in Section 2. These cases keep coming up and again. So, there's this one part of the attack that is specifically about the federal VRA so that we no longer have protections on the federal level. Congress has had a bill in front of them for years that could help restore the federal VRA to what it was. They refused to act. So in response to that, and also in response to a lot of the other attacks that we've seen on voting rights, what states have done have been to pass their own state voting rights acts to make sure that the voters in those states are protected no matter what happens with the federal VRA. And that's what the New Jersey Voting Rights Act would do.
And I guess, and Nuzhat, I don't want to cut you off, but I guess I want you to say every other word, states' rights, because that's one thing this federal act really seeks to gut as well, is states' rights. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of attacks on state administration of elections and voting across the board. This is slightly a different topic, but definitely related. States in general maintain voter rolls. They maintain and administer elections. That's really within the state's purview. 2 weeks ago, the DOJ actually sued the state of New Jersey for full access to their unredacted voter rolls, saying that the state of New Jersey needs to turn over all of the sensitive voter information that folks who go to register to vote, that the state has. And so, of course, right now, I think, we can all agree that would be used for probably sinister purposes, maybe creating a national database, targeting voters. But,
a massive purge of voter rolls, anything of anybody who they deem suspicious or who may not be certified as a citizen.
And Nuzhat.
Yep.
So there were states that voluntarily gave over their voter rolls, and then and other states like Jersey, from what I hear you saying, fought. And the states that fought, I believe they're prevailing. But we know in Georgia, they went in and took them, and based off of what they said happened back at the election, the previous election that had already been litigated. But Zaid just said, so we think it may be voter purge. Is that what you believe that they want access to the rolls for, or are there other things as well?
I think there's a handful of things that they can do with the voter roll, right? One is 100% to make sure that the purges are more frequent, which means that people of color, Black and other voters are more likely to get purged in these voter roll purges. So it would increase the likelihood that, voters of color are disproportionately impacted by these voter roll purges. They could take this information and require states to purge more often, so that if you are purged right before an election in a place like New Jersey that doesn't have same-day voter registration and it has a 21-day arbitrary deadline for you to register, now you're suddenly disenfranchised before you can vote, and you don't even know it because you've been purged. So that's definitely one of the possibilities. Another possibility is that they take all of this information, create a sort of national database, and now they can go in and target, voters that have.
Excuse me for 1 second. Oh, no, go ahead. There you go. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that and then they can go and target voters from immigrant backgrounds, target voters who maybe have a criminal conviction in their past, but have their right to vote been restored. There's a lot of ways in which they could use the database to target and specifically suppress voters from different backgrounds.
And I tell you, this walk into the midterms is challenging. And I know Chairman Hamm has said in the past, in light of what they're doing, one way that we can overwhelm the efforts is to almost vote at 100%, because we know that many of our communities vote at like 30%. So if every registered voter was to come out, that would probably negate what they're trying to do, maybe?
I think that's hard, right? Because, on the one hand, obviously we want very high voter turnout. But on the other hand, if there are laws that are put in place that make it so that you can't register to vote, then that's automatically disenfranchising a good number of population that cannot go vote because they are no longer registered to vote. Similarly, there are a lot of different obstacles that voters face, even in a place like New Jersey. And those obstacles either suppress the vote, discourage voters from voting, maybe make it so that they don't vote in next election cycles. And that's where pieces of legislation like the New Jersey Voting Rights Act come in, because it helps address a lot of those issues that otherwise would keep these communities from voting, more than 30%.
And to be clear, the SAVE Act, and I really want us to talk almost every week about this, because the SAVE Act just doesn't say voter ID. It speaks to a passport, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it speaks to persons having a passport. And I work voter elections. I can't, and let me be clear that when you register to vote, you have to show the ID there. And if you didn't, and if it's your first time, when you come, you have to, the machine asks, please present ID for the person for the first time. But can you imagine every election, everybody coming up, showing an ID, and also because we don't have the same rules like it was many years ago it may be on the books, but I know it's not as, take the day off and so on and so forth. A lot of people, that's even that creates a hardship, because many times people are often can't take off of work, they don't have the time, and so on and so forth. But I believe the SAVE Act, it speaks to a passport specifically. Am I wrong or right?
So the SAVE Act would require you, if you need to register to vote for the first time or re-register, it would require you to prove your citizenship through either a passport or a birth certificate, or some form of government issued ID like that, which for many, many reasons, a lot of people don't have a passport. It's expensive, first of all. There's many reasons why someone might not have access to their birth certificate. And then it also disenfranchises, or at least creates a very significant hurdle for anyone whose last name has changed. And so now their last name no longer matches their birth certificate, right? So it impacts any married woman who has taken on her spouse's last name.
That's right. And I know that that people that this overwhelmingly so you hear them keep saying that it's bipartisan, that the votes, and they, as I understand it, they're lobbying houses of our government very hard to get them to pass this before the midterm. Is that correct as well?
So the Save America Act has passed through the House of Representatives, unfortunately. It's already passed one house. Right now, it has not been slated to be heard in the Senate, but that's currently what the president is trying to do, is to force that vote. A previous version of the bill that was just called the SAVE Act actually failed last session because they were not able to bring it to the Senate. But this session, President Trump is really there advocating for its passage, and as you mentioned earlier, tying a lot of things to the passage of this. So I would say, unfortunately, there's a more serious chance that it could possibly pass the Senate this go around than last session.
Okay. And are you walking through, if let's say it does pass and well, we know if it does pass, it hits his desk, he signs it immediately. So let's say it did pass. What you were saying in the beginning, does it still go back to states' rights, or this would override?
So if the SAVE Act were to be passed, it would be what would be required in elections, particularly federal elections going forward. I do think that if it does pass, I will not say when, but if it passes, it will immediately face a lot of different lawsuits, which hopefully would stop it in its tracks. But it might do the damage before that lawsuit really gets off the ground, right?
Right.
And that's what they're concerned about, doing the damage.
Right.
Is that a connection?
Oh, sorry. Am I back?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Sorry. Internet connection woes all the time.
Yeah.
Well, what I was saying is that a place like New Jersey could try to mitigate some of the harm from the SAVE Act by passing something like same-day voter registration. So if you are, if you do somehow are purged and you lose that right to vote, or you have your registration purged, you can at least get everything in order and then register to vote the day of, as opposed to being completely disenfranchised. So it's not a perfect cure, but it is at least one important step that New Jersey could take, given the harms and dangers of the SAVE Act.
And so I was on here looking at election results when we were interviewing Ms. Lloyd, and our clerk, Chris Durkin, has important announcement. Due to a recent legislative change, vote by mail applications can now be submitted electronically through the New Jersey Division of Elections website. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so traditionally when you have had to vote by mail, you had to print out an application and either mail that application or take it to your county election office. Now you can actually register to vote by mail through the website, which is fantastic and easily accessible. What I will say is that New Jersey has one of the best vote by mail sort of laws in the country. You can either choose to vote by mail every single, request a ballot every single election cycle, or if you decide that, vote by mail is how you want to vote going forward forever, you can ask to be put on these sort of permanent vote by mail list in New Jersey, and then you will never have to request that mail-in ballot again. They will just automatically send it to you every election cycle.
And also the SAVE Act seeks to stop vote by mail, right?
That's right.
It would impact vote by mail. It would impact online registration. Right now, you can go to the state's website and register to vote online. I believe that's another place where the Save America Act would impact that, because it would require you, in order to register to vote, you would have to go to the county official and present those, the forms of documents that we talked about. And you can't do that online, right? So so it would really impact online voter registration, if not completely shutter it.
Yeah, going back to the Flintstone age. Oh my gosh, this is getting your
Back to
your
the
rock your Rockwheel car and go down to the county courthouse. It's challenge. It's this what it's going to do. I mean, because what it has helped is it has helped voter turnout. And we're still not where we need to be with voter turnout, but it does make it seamless. And I think one of the things that we have to keep saying is voter fraud is like nearly non-existent. So they're seeking to fix something that's not broke.
No.
Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. This is a bit of misinformation, dangerous misinformation, I would say, that has been proliferated, I think, for the past 6+ years, that voter fraud is something that exists, that non-citizens are going and voting, that people are voting multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
None of these things are true. In the case that there is any sort of voter fraud, it's so minimal that is statistically insignificant. Usually, if there is an instance of voter fraud that is intentional, it is immediately caught because there are a lot of systems put in place to make sure that that cannot happen. So no, non-citizens are not voting. There is not widespread voter fraud occurring. All of that is a lie to try and scare people from going to vote and from trusting the system that works and has worked before for years and years before now.
It's amazing because I actually went and looked, and you could see the cases where there were voter fraud. And like one of the things, for instance, I think that they fixed was how many ballots you could have, one person could walk in, and I'm sure that was something that they found to be a need to change. So at one time you could one person could take up to 10 ballots in, but now you only could take 3. Which makes it that really made, so something where it may have given opportunity, it's extremely hard to even do it in that fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just so many checks that are put in place. When you register to vote, there's different departments that have to look at your registration to confirm who it is that you are. If your signature does not match to vote, then you will, your ballot will be sent back to you to make sure that you match your signatures. There's so many things that have been put in place to make sure these things do not happen, which is why these things are not happening. And we just have to remember that and remember to ignore everyone who is trying to make it seem as though voter fraud exists.
And even in this thing, like I registered to vote when I was a senior in high school. So by now, 40 years later, of course, my signature is going to change. And as we do get older or if you have life experiences or life challenges, that may cause your signature to vote. And I know they compare it against your ID and things of that nature. So it's amazing. Like you said, when these things come up, there's always checks and balances in place to rectify it immediately.
Absolutely.
Jonathan, did you have a question?
Yeah, is there any hope for this stuff? Like, it seems like the Congress already passed it, whether it gets through the Senate or not. Do you think it has a chance to get through the Senate?
I want to be optimistic and say that it does not have a chance to get through the Senate.
Let's take a step back. What is required for it to pass in the Senate?
Right.
So everything is clear.
Sure. So it does need. Oh my goodness! I believe it's a 2/3 vote. It does need a 2/3 vote.
Right.
My brain.
Yes,
stopped.
Wait, it actually needs a 2/3 vote, not just 59 votes.
Yeah. So it needs a 2/3 vote, and which is why one of the things that they are now contemplating is to eliminate the filibuster, because if you eliminate the filibuster in the Senate, then that switches to a simple majority, and a simple majority in that instance could pass the SAFE Act.
Oh, so it's the only thing that's keeping it right now are the Senate rule of the filibuster.
Right. And presumably they still don't have fully the full number of votes, but that changes day to day, I think, in terms of people flipping votes, people coming on board because the federal administration.
They're lobbying hard. Yeah.
And they're scared of Trump.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the question would be, like, Democrats have always snatched defeat from the hands of victory. Uh, do you think that? Yeah, because I think it's 3/5, like 60, is required to break the filibuster in the Senate, right? Like, um, do you think that there are Democrats who break ranks? Do you? What do you think the are? Does it look like
Jersey.
they will in any way get the votes to break this filibuster? Excuse me, is the greatest danger right now them eliminating the filibuster?
I think that there is a danger of it. I will say that eliminating the filibuster is something that has been very contentious for many years because it goes both ways, right?
Right.
If the federal administration, if the makeup of Congress changes, especially after midterms, and it flips the other way, if you get rid of the filibuster, then now the opponent side can now pass bills easier. So I think that is a little bit of a limiting factor. The fear that if you eliminate it now, like, you have to face the consequences of that should you lose power. But I think, to your question as to where the vote's going to sort of fall right now, I think the best thing we can do is to be loud, to contact all of our Congress people as much as we can, saying that this is an outrage, that this cannot be passed. People came together and were so outraged last session that did help kill the bill. And if we did it once, we can do it again.
Going to what you were talking about. Oh, Donna?
No, I just wanted to follow on that because on February 11th, 2026, the vote was 218 to 213. It legislated mandates documentary of proof of citizenship for voter registration and requires photo ID at the polls, along with regular voter roll purges based on a Department of Homeland Security data. Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to read that, Nuzhat. Jonathan, you're mute.
Muted, Jonathan.
We get that this act is just horrible to voting rights. And you brought up something before. I know that you also are pursuing policies within New Jersey. I want to circle back to something that Zaid brought up earlier when he said that there's a lot of legislation that we want to get passed with a Democratic governor, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic legislature. Some of the bills that he brought up was the Immigrant Trust Act. Mm-hmm. How close is that to passing? And why is it being stalled?
So my understanding during the last session, much like with the NJVRA, the Immigrant Trust Act was very, very close to passing. It actually did pass through both the Senate and the Assembly, and then Governor Murphy at the time did not sign it into law. So it was a veto from the governor's side. So now the Immigrant Trust Act is backed, and I believe it has definitely moved. I haven't followed it as closely as I should have, unfortunately, but I do know that it has had at least one hearing. There have been changes made to it, and so there's still momentum there. But my understanding is that Governor Sherrill is approaching it differently than perhaps what advocates would want.
So she would wait. You mean that she won't sign it?
It is at least being. I believe it is at least having changes to it from both sides, from the legislature and perhaps from the governor herself. I'm not 100% sure that limit it further than it had been back in December when it was about to pass.
What is the controversy about it? It really, I thought, was one that protected immigrants in the United States from unlawful search and seizure.
Yeah,
like you actually have to have I believe that the Immigrant Trust Act was, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but the way that I've heard it was that in order to stop someone, you would actually need a warrant for that specific person. You can't just round people up, and you just can't do what the Supreme Court said, which is if you look like an immigrant, we can stop you.
I believe the Immigrant Trust Act, and again, I do want to be clear that I'm not the expert on here, but I do believe that there's multiple bills that constitute this act, and
that was a strategy to get it through.
Okay.
Right. And so I think that is one of them. And I think one of them is also about data privacy and what the state can share with, say, ICE enforcement. I don't know how that has changed. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, but I know that that's at least one of the other components of the Immigrant Trust Act is interactions with ICE and data privacy of immigrants and non-citizens in particular.
And my apology for asking you that, because you're here for the voting right, to talk about voting rights. So I just because you were talking about it, and I brought that up, and I realized that probably that is not the question that you're here for.
Like Jim Frazier, he wants to you got.
No. So are you also talking about Vote 16 as well as the other legislation that would help within a Voting Rights Act on a state level?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different, I think, big pieces of legislation that should the legislature decide to care about democracy, they could pass. VRA, obviously, I've talked about. There is state legislation to lower the voting age for school board and municipal elections to 16 and 17-year-olds. Currently, last session as well, there just wasn't widespread support for it. And so what organizations like the Institute has been doing instead is working with municipalities that pass it on a local level.
Right.
So last year, Newark was the very first city in Jersey to lower the voting age to 16 and 17 in school board elections. 16 and 17-year-olds were able to vote for the first time in last year's school board elections. They will be able to do so this upcoming school board election as well. We're hoping that by beginning early, not only do you instill them with civic responsibility and civic engagement, but the younger you get folks to be invested in the electoral process in their communities, that just sets them up to want to become voters and become return voters when they are eventually. Is definitely one piece of legislation that the legislature could advance. I've mentioned it a couple of times. Same-day voter registration. That is one campaign that has lasted even longer than the NJVRA. I think that has been going on for 5-6+ years. It has bipartisan support. There are 20+ other states in the country that have same-day voter registration. It's frankly absurd that New Jersey does not have same-day voter registration, but that is another really important piece of democracy bill that the legislature could pass right now to help offset a lot of the things that are going on.
Wow. So I like that when you're talking about New Jersey solutions to larger things that are happening in terms of voting rights. And do you think it's ironic that you're essentially supporting a states' rights position? And right now, there are states all over the country who are like, but wait, states' rights, right, in order to protect Black and Brown people and the right to vote.
It's honestly, I think this has been one of the most interesting changes in just general advocacy and sort of where the power is over the past, 6+ years. It used to be that you could trust the federal government to do the right thing or to support your rights, to protect your rights. Unfortunately, what we've seen since, 2016, I keep saying 6 years, it's 10 years, which is horrible. But for the past 10 years or so, right, we have not been able to trust the federal government in the same way. And so the fight has really gone from the federal national level to the state level. So there are a lot of states groups like the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice that are here trying to advocate for state and local legislation to be passed to protect voters and citizens in all sorts of areas through state and local legislation. But it's been an interesting shift. But that is definitely, I think, where the fight is right now, and perhaps the most successful fight, depending on what state you're in.
It's interesting because I think that and this is, and Zaid, you could also comment on this, especially for the political parts of it. We're talking about New Jersey politics and what we can get and can't get and how we're looking at it, and it's all a liberal state. But our theme tonight has been elections matter, elections have consequences. And in this specific case, I guess primaries matter. Zaid, do you want to speak to that? Like, we are fighting so hard to get legislation that seems to be not controversial, right? Like, New Jersey is almost majority minority when you talk about Blacks, Latinos, Asians. Like, I think a large part of the reason why Sherelle won in the way that she did, even though the polls were possibly suggesting otherwise, is that in those weeks leading up to the election, ICE went crazy around the country. And it went crazy around the country in ways that everybody of color, like if you are Indian, if you are Asian, if you are Latino, like, she got 82% of the Asian vote. 82%. That's almost unheard of. Like, as in, for politics, like most elections, local, national, et cetera, they might get 2/3 of the Asian vote, but they might get a 60. But going 80%, that's almost in the level of, African Americans in terms of voting, like in the 80s and 90%, right, for particular candidates. And I think that Latino voters, the ones who even in a population that went for that largely went a surprisingly way for Trump during the 2024 campaign, at like I think Trump's largest group of people who switched from 2020 to 2024 were first-generation immigrants. And the fact that in New Jersey, when he was like, Trump has done nothing wrong, I'll give him A+. And it seems like after that in the debate, it just cratered. So with Zaid, how important do you think primaries are in New Jersey? And do you think that politicians should think differently?
Democrat, now I'm not the guest, but since you asked me, I'm gonna tell you what I was trying to say several moments ago. Democratic Party is not immune from racism either. New Jersey is the up South state, the last state to end slavery, right? The state that was so racist they couldn't vote for Abraham. They couldn't push Abraham Lincoln to the last to certify the 13th Amendment. It's Jersey. You want to talk about Jersey? Let's talk.
So Jersey was the last to certify the 13th Amendment.
Yes. And the Institute has done a hell of a study as a part of their reparations work to document how that has gone down. They don't call us just the Soprano State for nothing. And underneath this conversation is a whole slew of Democrats who are all very comfortable with gutting the Oprah Act.
Huh. And the Oprah Act was what? Can you break that down for us?
Records Act. All about accountability and transparency. That's why they call this a Soprano State. It ain't got nothing to do with no fictional Tony Soprano. It's a culture, a political culture in this state that was built on racism and corruption from the door.
But let me ask.
Now, Donna is the elected Democrat in the House. You need to jump in on this because you know where I stand.
Donna's the elected activist in the House that at the time I aligned myself with the Democrats, but I vote along interests that I align. But let me just, which has generally been Democrat, but Nuzhat, let me ask you, where are we? So in terms of women's rights, you would want to live in New Jersey and New York City. New Jersey, in the presidential, we went with Kamala. And for the second time, we voted for a woman for governor. Where are we on the right side when it comes to a woman being in leadership for the president? Would you say, Nuzhat?
For New Jersey?
Yes, for New Jersey. I know as a country we're not. Yeah, and if you're looking at it, how close are we marching closer to see I think the issue that we don't talk about enough, I mean, because clearly on both elections when it came for this person to get the White House, when it just came to intellect, he was not even on the map when it came against the candidates that he ran against. Very brilliant candidates that with your eyes closed, you would have seen that. But I believe as a country, we're not there, but are we getting closer, do you believe?
I think what we have seen, especially from the last election, from our gubernatorial election last year, is that voters are mad, they're paying attention, and they are going to vote for candidates that represent them, that represent their interests. And so if there is a woman candidate on the presidential, slate that does those things, right? That speaks to the voters of New Jersey, that cares about the voters of New Jersey, that is talking about things that the voters of New Jersey are impacted by, then I see no reason why that couldn't be the case.
And you're speaking New Jersey, and I think both. I know New Jersey went Kamala, and I believe New Jersey went Hillary, right? But when you look at it, have you had the opportunity to look at states and see, like, if you look at from the last time when it was Hillary for president versus when it was Kamala for president, and if you're looking federally across, would you say that we were closer this time?
So from what I remember, and from what sort of everyone was reporting, in 2024, the margins across the board, not only in New Jersey but in New York as well, shifted a lot more right than it had been before. I think there's a variety of reasons for that. The voters were speaking their needs, they were speaking their piece. But in terms of, if we're comparing it, 2016 to 2020 to 2024, there was definitely a market shift in New Jersey rightward across different counties, across different cities, even though overall the state went from. But then, so that was 2024. But then what we saw with the gubernatorial race last year is that, it was completely the opposite. Governor Sherrill won in a lot of districts by a tremendous amount that had shifted rightward the previous election. To me, this really speaks again to voters are angry. Voters want to be represented. They want to be heard, and they're sort of sick of seeing the same sorts of things happening over and over again.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we as a country, every time we put a woman up, I just think, I don't know. And maybe I'm saying, and I was even surprised when it came to, and that was more with the Supreme Court when they were able to overturn, Roe versus Wade. But, I don't know, because you had brilliant candidates, but like as you said, people were so upset and emotional where they were not saying, well, does this issue, and Jonathan, you always say how people are voting against their own interests. I guess I'm also asking, are we civically engaged enough where we're not so emotional, but we're saying, whoa, this is going to be this is going to be that. If I vote for this is going to happen. If I vote for that is going to happen. That's what I guess I'm asking. And gender as well. And gender.
I definitely think there's a lot of civic education that we can be doing that is left on the board. Being a well-educated, informed voter is not something that you're born with. That's something that as you vote, as you learn things, you grow that. It's a skill set in and of itself. And I think it's one of the things, if you become a more informed voter, you are able to vote from a more policy perspective. But a lot of voters, haven't had that civic education. And a lot of voters do vote from their emotions because those are the things that are impacting them right now, right? So in 2024, what we heard across the board was the big issue was affordability, grocery prices. And so voters voted for the candidate that they thought was speaking to those issues. And of course, that was a really emotional way to vote. Those were the things that were very much impacting them right then. So I guess that's a long way of saying that there's a lot of civic education left to be done to really get to the point of like, let's all vote from a policy perspective. But there's a lot of things that New Jersey can be doing, right, to try and increase that civic education and civic engagement.
And as I said, that I sat on city council for 12 years. Now, when I was in high school, civics was, matter of fact, I registered to vote in high school. But when I became an elected person from like 2008 to 2020, at least in my experience, is that that they did not welcome elected officials as much as when I was coming up in high school. And that goes to speak to civics. And I'll quote Senator Rice. And he used to always explain that, listen, election season is a very short season. After that is a job. And we should want our elected officials coming in, explaining policy, and letting students get more engaged and acquainted with our elected officials, so there's not such a long period of time before they start. Like I immediately was voting right out of high school, and I don't believe that's the case now. And I hope with the school board that students can vote now, at 16 when it becomes the school board. I hope that causes an engagement civically, but we have to get back to bringing civics into the school. And like, again, when I was growing up, we were going to DC, we were meeting with our senators, we were, by senior year, you were ready to be engaged leaving out of high school. And I don't really think that's the case now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, sorry, please go ahead.
No, you were saying.
I was just going to say that I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is we're coming up to budget season. The legislature is for the month of April. They're going to be looking at the budget. The governor just came out with her state budget or her proposed budget earlier this week. And one thing I noticed is that there's no funding. There was no mention of voting, of democracy, of anything related to democracy. So that's one thing that I think really falls by the wayside when we think of budget and we're thinking of funding. We do need to be funding civic education. We need to be funding different things that make it easier to vote. I think there's just like a lack of funding investment in our democracy because it's not seen as important. But that is how democracy falls by the wayside. So I think to your point, more funding for civic education. 100%.
And thank you for looking for that in the budget, especially at a time where we may not be saying that word to, be like, ooh, remember democracy in the history books. Jonathan, I'm sorry, you were about to say?
I was just going to say, just talk about, two things. First, I know we've kept you here way past your time. So I just want to respect your time if you have to go. And to see, just to, again, respect your time. And have Donna ask you the ritual question. Okay. So Donna, can you ask the ritual question?
And Zaid said you've been here before, so you should know this question. When you're doing the work that you do around civic engagement, educating the state of New Jersey, I don't know if you practice it, when you're practicing preparing the case, when you're doing all of that work, is there a hip hop artist, individual or group that you listen to that keeps you inspired?
Can I admit something so terrible, which is that I have, for the past few years, just gotten really into audiobooks. And so now instead of listening to music, I listen to audiobooks wherever I go. Okay. Which is not to say, I think in the past, I've listened to Beyonce. I've listened to Kendrick Lamar, sort of the big folks in the mainstream. But now I just listen to audiobooks.
Like
okay. I heard Kendrick is under fire for some things that he said more recently.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but what? but what book are you? Okay, what book are you reading?
So I recently finished a book called Everything is Tuberculosis.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was fantastic. It really, it goes through just how tuberculosis is still one of the most prevalent killers globally. I didn't know anything about it. It goes into the history of tuberculosis and how it has shaped all aspects of our society, including beauty standards and clothing. Fascinating. So fascinating.
Oh, okay. That's something for us to look at.
That's your rhythm, baby. That's your rhythm.
That's right.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for coming on. And thank you for spending extra time. I know that Lawrence Hamm was supposed to be on as well. That's one of the reasons why I was asking, is I had so many questions as well, because you and Larry would have been a great combination for this section.
But another time. Yeah, but Nuzhat, don't wait for us. If something comes out around this voting that you need for us to know, by all means, please reach out, because these days leading to the Jersey primary and every primary in between and after is very important. So if you know something that we need to know, please let us know and we'll make room for you.
Yeah, I will. Since I have you, I will just make a very quick plug for the VRA. The NJVRA is moving in the assembly, which is really exciting. We have a very strong sponsor in Assemblywoman Reynolds Jackson, but the bill will be heard in Assembly Appropriations next Thursday on the 19th. After that, it will hopefully go to an Assembly floor vote, and then we just have to work on the Senate President and getting the Senate to also pass it. But exciting moves, at least for the VRA.
The president's a piece of work.
And tell us what the VRA is again.
It's called the John R. Lewis Voter Empowerment Act of New Jersey, but it is a New Jersey Voting Rights Act. So that's why we call it the NJVRA.
Well, thank Assemblywoman for everything that she's been fighting for with these elections, and tell her we really appreciate her work.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Right on, Nuzhat. Right on, baby. Right on.
All right. So, Zaid, I just read in The Guardian that the case, anti-ICE protesters that were accused of being part of Antifa were found guilty of support for terrorism in Texas. And apparently was a case that tested whether the terrorism laws could be used to protest, to go after left-wing protesters. This is from The Guardian. A group of protesters in Texas was found guilty of providing support for terrorism and other charges on Friday in a closely watched case in which prosecutors alleged anti-ICE activists were actually part of an Antifa cell. The case was seen as a major test of the First Amendment and whether the government can use a broad anti-terrorism statute to prosecute left-wing protesters. It marked the first time the government alleged individuals were part of an Antifa terrorist cell in criminal prosecution, which is particularly wild because, don't get me wrong, but is there no such thing as an Antifa cell? I thought it was like Antifa was famously, they did not have any leadership in what they do. But 9 defendants, Benjamin Song, Zachary Evans, Autumn Hill, Megan Morris, Maricela Reda, and a series of other people were all tried together in the case. They faced a mix of charges from providing material support to terrorists, to rioting, to attempted murder, as well as firearms and explosive charges. Are you familiar with the case or the implications of it?
No, I'm not. And I'm getting ready to put it in the chat now. Okay. No, I'm not.
You deal in protests all the time, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the implications of it are very dangerous. right? Because the way that protest has been attacked, particularly protests not just against ICE, but also, in terms of Palestinian solidarity, right? I mean, we have had other times in this country's history where conspiracy charges have been thrown about in a way that has been quite dangerous, and that's how some of our folks get locked up and wind up being political prisoners.
Right.
Right. So its implications on its face are very dangerous. I don't know anything about the case itself and any of the facts and who's involved and what court it went through and all of that. But on its face, it's very serious. And because conspiracy is open-ended. We think we got you trying to do something, and so that's the time that we're living in.
Right.
It's definitely reflective of the time that we're living in.
And I put that out there. And to change the subject, I know we have 15 minutes left. Donna, this is kind of a throw for you. I know that there are only two awards that I'm interested in when it comes to the Oscars, and that is Michael B. Jordan should win for Best Actor, and Sinners should win for Best Director and Best Motion Picture. Well, I guess three. And of course, I think that Delroy Lindo is also going to win. But love the movie Sinners. Glad that it got nominated. I think it's going to get snubbed. What are your thoughts on the Oscars? And Zaid, have you seen Sinners?
Yes, I have.
Okay, cool.
I was the last one to see it, but Sinners was fabulous. I was the last one to see it.
John, you were the last one. No, I don't think you were the last one to see it. You know who I think was the last one to see it?
Who was?
I don't know if Ed saw it yet.
Really? Yeah.
Ed, where are you? Oh my gosh, it was fabulous. And you know what was interesting? So Michael B, he played two characters. And the character where the young woman who was, would you call her a medicine woman? That was when he came back, that was his girlfriend and they got reacquainted.
Right.
How I'm referring to? So have you seen the NAACP Awards?
I did not.
Okay, so I seen a clip where she spoke, and she spoke about Michael B. Jordan. No, she was being interviewed, and she spoke about Michael B. Jordan, his performance. And she said that his performance was so, like, she would speak, like, depending on what room she would walk in, she would address him on a specific character. So her boyfriend's name was, what was the two characters' name?
There was, so you're asking these open-ended questions.
Okay, so her boyfriend's character, and so it was Jimmy Kimmel who was interviewing, and it was so funny because she said when he was in the character of her boyfriend, I think he had a dimple, and then the other one he did. And so it was hilarious because
that should be called physical acting.
Yeah, and it was like, so he would put a dimple when he was that character, and then he would not have the dimple when he was the other. And Jimmy Kimmel was like, wait, he was able to dimple the character. Say it again.
He was Smoke and Stack.
So yeah, Smoke and Stack was her boyfriend, right?
You saw the movie. I'm having you talk.
I gotta remember, but her boyfriend. So he had the dimple, but she said that his characters, like, even though it was the same person, when he would get into character, it was that defined that she would address him like, "Hey, Stack, what you doing?" Like, "Hey, Smoke," and everything, because it was that noticeable when he was portraying each different character and everything. So that I thought that was pretty amazing. Because sometimes, Eddie Murphy was also, but he didn't do it the way, like Eddie Murphy would do it and physically get into different costumes and everything. And Michael B. Jordan just changed, they were identical and everything. So I thought that was pretty amazing when it spoke to, him as a character and when he was portraying the two different characters.
And of course, also because, Michael B. Jordan is from Arts High School. So
Yes,
big shout out to Michael B. Jordan and
North.
And
I'm gonna tell you something. I thought the sister who played the Councilwoman was the scene stealer.
That's the one who I'm talking about. That's what I'm speaking of. Yeah, that was.
I thought she was the scene stealer.
you're
Yes.
talking about
Young
Wumi
sister
Misako.
hasn't had a
Yeah.
part like that in the past. She's got a West African background, playing a country Councilwoman. She killed that.
That was her. She was the boyfriend. She was the girlfriend. That's when I said the medicine. That's exactly.
I hear you, but I want you to hear what I'm saying, right?
Mhm.
I'm saying she was the scene stealer. This is acting language in the whole film. I thought she was incredible.
She's a beautiful woman, Zaid. I admit. But you're not speaking to her beauty. You're speaking to her acting.
I'm talking about her acting.
All right,
I'm
Jonathan,
only kidding.
Say it again, Jonathan.
what moved you? Zai, what moved you?
Oh, I actually was not as moved as many Sinners watchers were, because I'm just not into vampire stuff. I'm just not into that. Right?
I'm talking about her
grew up
Oh
on
my God. I hate vampires, but I think the vampires was so low key that the actual story.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But I think the build up of the ultimate, act of losing that young man who they were trying to save and whatnot, how that ultimately characterized how we can go from vampirism on the one hand to lynching on the other, right? That metaphor I thought was profound, and the build-up to that was profound. I also think whenever you see, this is a generation. We are now 3 to 4 generations removed from the folk culture that is the foundation of American music. Our work songs, our field shouts, our gospel, our blues, and to see another generation embrace that on a high level, is something very healthy for the culture.
Yeah, that soundtrack is nothing to be played with. That soundtrack is serious. Whew. Jonathan, if I can go back for a second to initially, did you see Don Lemon's post tonight?
You're always asking me these questions, Donna. I'm not into Don Lemon like that.
So it's no. So that answer would be no. I just want to say that he reposted a post from the person occupying the White House that said, moments ago, at my direction, the United States Central Command executed one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East and totally obliterated every military target in Iran's crown jewel, Karg Island. Our weapons are the most powerful, and that the world has not ever known. For reasons of decency, I have chosen not to wipe out the oil infrastructure on the island. And this is the part I wanted to say. However, should Iran or anyone else do anything to interfere with the free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, I will immediately reconsider this decision. And then he goes in, but this early when they were doing the briefing, I had to applaud, because you know how you're hearing things and sometimes you think it's you. But then when the journalist who was speaking, he said that the person occupying the position of the Secretary of Defense, and I say Secretary of Defense, that he came and said, today is the most, the worst day ever. And then yesterday said, today is the worst day ever. And then the day before that, today is the worst day ever. How they kept saying that. And the journalists know, and it's interesting how people are taking on the language of the person occupying the White House. It's like our language has become limited, so to speak. And I just wanted to take note, because you're just listening. It's like, they keep saying this yesterday, or is this a repeat of what they said yesterday? Is this really today, March 13th information? And I just noticed that, and I was glad that the journalist pointed out that every day they come on, so this is the worst day ever.
Right.
Yeah, and several years ago they said they destroyed, Iran's capacity to produce a nuclear weapon, but that's what this is all about.
Right. Like going back to the earlier conversation, I think this is the stupidest war in the history of many stupid wars. Like I didn't think anything could be as stupid as the Bush's war in Iraq, where we're like, you have weapons of mass destruction, and everyone's like, that's probably not.
Have you ever heard of Vietnam?
Fair enough, because that was started off of a falsehood too. But it just seems like
it lasted 10 years.
Yeah, I'm saying there are a long series of stupid wars, but I think that as stupid, and let's compare, right? As stupid as Vietnam was in terms of fighting, right? Like we are trying to support, especially given the aftermath when the United States lost, and now people vacation in Vietnam, right? So it's like, oh my God, we have to fight in Vietnam, or if we don't fight in Vietnam, there'll be catastrophe. And then 20 years, 30 years after it's over, we're vacationing in Vietnam. And where people want to go there, people want to visit there, people want to hang out there, they want to have to do conferences. Right. So yes, that is
the state too.
You said what?
They held on to their identity.
Right. It is 100% who they are, who they took. Like when they won the Vietnam War, they remained who they were. There's still Ho Chi Minh City that you will visit. Right. So that the ways in which we fight stupid wars and we kill a lot of people for absolutely no reason. I think that I thought Vietnam was stupid, especially if you're looking at us vacationing there now. I thought the Iraq war was stupid because the Iraq war was stupid because they didn't attack us on 9/11. They were literally allies of the United States at some point. Right. And we actually strengthened people who we were beefing against there, right? Like we actually strengthened the influence of Iran when we took out Saddam Hussein. So we always do stuff that actually makes our situation worse. And we always double down by putting more bombs there, by blowing more people up. And I don't think that people have just come to grips with bombs don't liberate people, right? And as a talking point, if that because they don't believe it, and I don't know how stupid do you have to be to believe it if you just study what happens in those situations.
Capitalism will make you stupid.
Oh, I was about to say that they do believe that they get paid during war. Do we know why Condoleezza Rice was just there recently in DC at the White House?
I do not know.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of the, out of the Bush war that it was definitely, or one of the things that was definitely discussed was that the amount of money that to be made. So we understand that they are, the money, capitalism is big. And what I never forget watching a movie about Vietnam, and the writer sought to put a line in the movie that it was a Vietnam movie where there was soldiers fighting, and this happened to be particularly a Black soldier fighting. And the person that was playing a Vietnamese person, he said to the Black soldier, "Why would you come all the way over here to fight for a country that doesn't even respect you where you live at?" And I'll never forget that line in that movie.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, like so when you're talking about Iran, I don't even think that the worst part is so many people. There are a few people, obviously, who are making billions of dollars off in terms of the defense industry. But when you were looking at, and oil companies are making money because their product is making, like it is more valuable. The prices are going up. The American consumers, this clearly was not in the interest of American consumers, because you knew that if you attack Iran, oil prices are going to go up. If you attack them really, really hard, oil prices are going to go crazy. If you do what you're doing right now, yeah, it might get over $200 a barrel, because the ways in which that geography works, I'm glad that we had that conversation. But we are nearing the end of our show, as it actually 9 o'clock.
But Jonathan, I know you wanted to start, but that thought that not only gas gets higher, but the gas gets higher as we ride to the grocery store, that causes the groceries to go up because everything is affected by gas, because everything that gets to it is gas. So yes, it's very crazy now.
So it's going to spike inflation, right?
All
like
is choice for the capitalists.
Yeah.
And
closing, shout out to Jerome Powell. That ruling that came out in Jerome Powell, and them trying to cause him to interest rates to go down, and the ruling that came out in his favor.
All right. Well, that is the end of our show. I want to thank all the guests that have come out, that came out today. Special thanks to Dr. Carlton Payne, Dr. James McIntosh, Professor Linda Carter, and also to Linda Lloyd, who's running for Councilwoman at Large. Thanks to Nuzhat Chowdhury from the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice, and everyone who came out for the show. I know that you want to say last announcement, so Donna, Zaid, before we go off, anything going on this weekend?
All eyes should be on Cuba and the urgent Cuba solidarity work that is happening right now. To be sure, this guy would like to get out of Iran and come to Cuba next.
True.
Of genuine self-determination and socialism in the Western Hemisphere is being strangled like never before. There's a weekend conference that's taking place in the city this weekend by the U.S.-Cuba Normalization Committee and Coalition. I'll be performing tomorrow night at the cultural part of it. Tomorrow also at Source of Knowledge Bookstore, 4 o'clock, The History of Protest in the United States by Gloria Brown Marshall. Gloria will be at the bookstore. Linda Carter will be doing the conversation with Gloria. 4 o'clock, check that out. Source of Knowledge Bookstore, 867 Broad Street.
All right, sounds good. Donna, any announcements?
No, I just want to, as you said, Linda Lloyd, and I just want to echo the words that she wanted us to remind the viewers that are listening that her line, they picked their lines yesterday, and her line is B13. And noticing that today is the 13th of March, please go to her Instagram or her Facebook, and she asked that to make a donation of $13.
All right, great. We're going to have a lot of guests on in the coming weeks. And we're going to have a lot of politicians on who are running for office in the coming weeks. We are trying to talk to everybody, and we're trying to get a good conversation with them so they can get their message out. Again, this is All Politics Are Local. The cornerstone of our program is believing in civil civic discourse. So hopefully you will be able to get that in the weeks to come before the municipal elections in New York. Take care. Have a good evening and a good evening, and also weekend. Right, and have a good weekend and be safe.
Be safe. I got one more question. Okay.